gonna lie. Listen, 2019, 2020, not even close. 2021 started off pretty bad for Craig Allen.
2019, not my year. Hey, it's no big deal. 2020, also not my year. It wasn't many people's. 2021 is my year, though. I'm so far ahead right now, there's no way in heck Craig's gonna catch up to me. Me and this trophy got well acquainted at the start of the season. And hey, maybe I got a little bit too overconfident with some of my predictions because of it.
I'm telling you this right now. Jacare is not going to get submitted by Andrea Muniz.
To Sidney Crosby, there's an Alex Ovechkin. To LeBron James, there's the field. If you look at it in baseball, there's Mike Trout. There's Shohei Ohtani now. They play on the same team. But our Fight Night picks, I'll tell you something. We have a close MVP race. It's not going to be close after December 18th.
I'm tasked with what the Utah Jazz in 1999 were asked to do. I'm trying to keep Craig from getting his three-peat for the Fight Night Picks MVP. And hey, I can feel it. This trophy is as good as mine by the end of this year.
And with the prediction MVP trophy behind us, welcome to the last episode with Fight Night Picks for 2021, the busy year that was. As always, one half of your host and duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. I suggest you do. And you can also find Matt Allen on the respective socials at Matt Allen FNP. We make it as easy as the one pick that sits between us, Matt. I'm really looking forward to the card coming up this weekend. I want to say it's a sleeper, but really, it's littered with great talent.
It's a phenomenal Fight Night card, and I feel like it hasn't really got the respect it deserves. Now, yes, we've had a lot of great pay-per-views and other great Fight Night cards, so it is understandable, and a lot of people are getting ready for the holidays, but Derrick Lewis versus Chris Daukaus is almost here, and I'm really excited for it.
I mean, if you look at it, this is Derrick Lewis's 9th main event in the UFC, and really, it's the 4th in a row he faced. Who else but Alexei Oleinik? Who else did he take on, Matt? I mean, Curtis Blades, Cyril Gahn. He won some of those fights. He lost one of those fights, but he's got a tough test coming up against Chris Daukaus. His last main event was about 4 years ago against Zhu Anyanwu that was in the UFC at one point. Now, Daukaus got finished in the second round of that fight. He had a great first round to it. And if you look at this card, we talk about it. I mean, there's all sorts of fighters that maybe you miss, maybe you don't think about. But realistically, 10 ranked fighters. We even have women's bantamweights ranked on the undercard. I mean, listen, Raquel Pennington taking on Macy Chiasson. That's a really big fight. One lone rookie, Matt. He's 26 fights into his pro career. He's 34 years old. And if you don't know about Victor Henry, he's a Josh Barnett guy. I couldn't be more excited about it. And our 2 picks for Fight of the Night. So let's throw it on over to our Fight of the Night screen. As always, presented by Manscaped. Check them out. Manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. You should check that out. And our Fight of the Night screen. Let's check it out.
Let us know down below in the comments section who you've got. It's time for the Fight of the Night with Fight Night Picks.
You might not believe it, but at one point, Darren Elkins wasn't a walking finishing machine. Really, it's been before his last 2 fights. This is a guy that has multiple decision wins in the UFC. About 9 of them since 2015. And if you look at that compared to the finishes, they might not be there, but you look at his last 2 fights, Derek Minner and Luis Eduardo Garagorri, he looks like a totally new fighter entering the later stage of his career. He's going to be taking on another guy that has trained and lived extensively in Southern California. And I wish they called him Cubber Lang, but it's not. They call him Kevin. No, I'm just kidding. It's Cub Swanson. I absolutely love this fight.
This is a phenomenal fight. This isn't like a main event worthy fight, but this is kind of a main event worthy fight. If this was 5 rounds, I'd be so happy. The thing about Darren Elkins is that if you have a loved one who's about to fight Darren Elkins, buy them a Peloton, like right now, because he can use his pace like few other guys in the division. It's going to be really interesting to see just how he stacks up against Cub Swanson, who's also just been at featherweight forever. It's so interesting that these guys have both been near the top of the division for as long as they have, but they've never actually fought each other yet.
Cub Swanson, Darren Elkins, you're not going to want to miss it. For the longest time, people thought of Diego Ferreira as one of those uncrowned champion types, and then he fought Anthony Pettis, and all of a sudden, his name was on the pedestal. But in his last fight, he faltered. He missed weight. He had a good first round against Gregor Gillespie, another one of those uncrowned champs. And now you have Diego Ferreira taking on My guy had a poll in Mateusz Gamrot. Matt, I absolutely love this fight, but why should people be excited about this one as you and I are?
This is one of those if you don't know, now you know kind of matchups. Because for Ferreira, no one really knew who he was until he did fight Anthony Pettis, and it finally did give him some of the spotlight that he rightfully deserved. Now, hopefully, this can sort of be the same opportunity for Gamrot, because if you know how good the KSW former champion really is, but he hasn't really had that opportunity to showcase his talent against the top of the division yet. This is a great opportunity to do so.
If you like the Striker's Paradise and if you dabble in Scrambler City, maybe you should check it out this weekend. This is going to be a great fight. And we're talking about Mateusz Gamrot taking on Diego Ferreira. I mean, if you look at it for Mateusz, he's probably going to be watching KSW in the morning. Giant card. Mehmet Khalidov taking on Roberto Soldic. You've got Parnas in the rematch, so that should be a great card. I'm going to be paying attention to that one on Saturday, as well as our own question mark kicks. You know it, you love it, the QMK. It's 2 hours before the prelims on Saturday. And listen, this card, like I said, top to bottom, a great one. If there's a couple of fight of the nights that we missed out, listen, there's 14 fights. You can't pick them all, but I know that I'm excited about Canada's guy, Charles Jourdain, taking on Andre Ewell. Do you have another one that's kind of floating under the radar?
This one got buried on the prelims, but you had kind of alluded to it earlier with ranked bantamweights being on this card. I think Raquel Pennington versus Macy Chiasson is a very fun fight. I know Raquel's been near and around the top of the division for a long time now, and she's fought some of the best, beat some, lost to some of them, but I think this is a very fun and fresh new matchup.
Well, Matt, we have one pick that separates us. May the best man win. Everything to be decided on Saturday with question mark kicks and the card in general. Make sure you drop a like, and down below, let us know in the comments section who's going to win, but B, who you've got to win on this card. We want to hear from you. It's the best part of the week, and it drives the show. So let's hear from you down below in the comments section, and I can't wait for this card. You're going to want to check out every single video, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it. Straight up, Jordan Leavitt's management team is probably a fan of card unboxings, probably a fan of sneaker reveals, probably a bit of a fan of walking around in their house at night in the dark, because straight up for Leavitt, this is his third opponent that has had a giant layoff, and we know nothing about, but we're pretty excited for it, so hopefully it pans out. And for Leavitt, I look at this one against Matt Sayles with so many different question marks, but I could say that when he took on Matt Wiman. If you look at it, Wiman had, 4.5 years off between 2014, 2019, and he comes out and doesn't take on the easiest of competition. Now, do we know that at the time for Matt Wiman? Well, not necessarily. I mean, you look at it for Wiman, okay, I mean, realistically, you have Luis Pena. Well, we knew a lot about him, but how's he going to fare? Well, not so well. And then he takes on Joe Selecki, and you go, okay, well, Joe's a pretty good grappler. Yeah. Wiman's not going to get hurt. And that was the case. So Wiman comes right back out there. He takes on Leavitt. And it's the most 0 to 100 knockout I've seen in my life. I really do think.
What do you think's worse? Ricardo Arona, Rampage Jackson, or Wiman Leavitt? Because they really are on that same level. I understand they were done in very different ways. One being like a Batista bomb style power bomb, and the other one being more of a traditional takedown. But that was still a scary way to win by knockout.
So that one is like a card unboxing. You could get a Shohei Ohtani autograph, you could get a Gary Carter autograph, or you could end up with a paperweight. And so you go from that fight against Wiman. Okay, you beat a guy that, 4.5, 5 years ago was close to the top of the mountain. He was beating, Isaac Valley Flag. So then you look at his next fight. He takes on Claudio Poyas. Now, Poyas just beat Chris Gritzmacher. He's the man that takes legs home. But realistically, for Poyas, he was in the same boat. The guy came into the Ultimate Fighter. He's 19 years old, but long periods of inactivity. He hadn't fought from 2019 until 2021. Marcus Mariano all the way up to Leavitt. So you look at that fight, and in that one, what happened? I mean, both guys, I wouldn't actually say clash styles, very similar styles, because their only takedowns are high crotch single legs. Matt, what did that fight leave you with?
It left me with a very poor taste in my mouth, and this is why. I thought Jordan Leavitt, I don't want to say he's on like a Sean O'Malley level of a prospect, but I thought he was at least an interesting prospect that you should definitely keep your eye on as he goes up the ranks. Because, like you had said, Matt Wiman wasn't in the prime of his career anymore, but if you have a UFC debut against at least a well-known opponent and you win by first-round knockout, it's hard for me to not get excited about that. So I thought, hey, Jordan Leavitt, he's going to be able to implement a little bit more of his wrestling, and just the snapshot that I saw in the Wiman fight, hopefully we'll get a little bit more. This is my problem with just sort of the hype train around Leavitt, or at least the one that I was starting to be the conductor of. He did not show the ability to have a plan B in his last fight out, and that really disappointed me because when you look at a prospect and at least someone who you think could sort of break through and become a true contender one day, you not only look for what their plan A is, you want to see what happens when they don't just have that plan A, when they have to go to plan B, C, or even D in some cases. And Leavitt, the second he was not able to secure his own takedown, really showed a lot of flaws in his own striking. And it's not like he's one of these grapplers who, for instance, Grant Dawson isn't a phenomenal striker, but I know that when he gets guys down to the ground, he's going to put a hurting on them, and he's going to be able to get most guys down to the mat. Every single time Jourdain Leavitt fights from here on out, in the back of my mind, I'm always going to wonder, okay, if he can't secure that takedown, what's he going to look like for 15 minutes?
So it's hard not to be overly critical because, again, Leavitt, Poyes, very similar game plans. I mean, if you look at it for Leavitt, he's a southpaw, but he's an awkward striker training out of Syndicate. Okay, so we had the card unboxing. We'll go with a shoe unboxing. So if we go with that one, I bought PSG Jordan 7s. Are they cool? I think they are, but the trouble with PSG Jordan 7s is that when you're a hype beast and you're buying these sneakers, Matt, sometimes you don't get the best bang for your buck, and now I'm going to be holding on to my PSG Jordan 7s for a long time, just like my Jourdain Leavitt. Okay, so we had long period of inactivity for Matt Wyman, and even between the fight that he had lost before the Leavitt fight, there was about a year. Poyes had been off for, what, a year and a half, a year and 9 months. Now he's going to be taking on Matt Sayles. Matt Sayles was on Dana White's Contender Series 2018. So there might actually be MMA fans out there, and I'm not judging you and I'm not making fun of you. There's probably fans out there that have never seen Matt Sayles fight in the UFC, which is kind of crazy if you think of it in terms of how long the UFC's been around. But again, I'm not judging you because he came into Dana White's Contender Series, what, 3.5 years ago?
It's wild it's been a show for that long.
Well, actually, that was the second season, exactly. So that's the craziest part. But he beats Chiasson Hedji, who's coming out of Palestine, a very accredited striker, Taekwondo black belt. And for Sayles, he fights a great fight. And the thing that we hear about Matt Sayles, this is a guy that they talk about his wrestling base, but it's his striking that gets it done. It's his right hand. He's got a good right cross. He's got a good right hook. He's got a good overhand right. He can use it so many different ways. But for Matt Sayles, he fights Chiasson Hedji, then he comes out a couple of months later, he fights Shimon Moraes, again, an accredited Muay Thai striker. In that fight, it's ultimately round 1, round 2, Moraes, round 3, it's Sayles. Then he goes out there and he fights Kyle Nelson. Nelson tries to take him down, goes 2 of 10 on takedown attempts. Matt Sayles just has 1 submission attempt for Nelson's 4, and he gets him submitted. So then, his next time out, he fights Bryce Mitchell. Mitchell just kind of storms across the cage, takes him down with a high crotch single, and then they fiddle around on the ground. And listen, that's a real oversimplification. Bryce Mitchell gets him in a twister. How many twisters are in the UFC? A couple?
3, I think, maybe. And Bryce Mitchell has 2 of them.
Yeah, exactly. It was insane, but for Sayles, he takes that time off. But is that good?
Well, we could reference an interview done by JHK where he was talking to Matt Sayles, and there was a very interesting part of that interview, Craig. I know you caught it, and it was, hey, I've been taking some time off. I know I fought at 145 pounds. I fought at featherweight in the UFC. Well, I've had a kid in the past year, and, you know, I haven't really been taking my training all that seriously.
Knee injury?
Knee injury as well, exactly. So he was injured. He's had a large change in his family. He got up to 250 pounds in between fights, and he's saying that this is kind of a pit stop on his way back down to 145 pounds. I think that's important to note, but that does worry me a little bit, because this is something I will say. If you may have gone up to, let's use Conor McGregor as an example. He now weighs 190 pounds. He's posted all those pictures of how big he looks. He is still in phenomenal shape, though, and he's still in what I'd call training shape. When Matt Sayles talks about him getting up to 250 pounds, this is only a guy who's 5'7". You have to imagine it's a little bit different than if, like, okay, Francis Ngannou weighs like 250 pounds, but he's 6'4". You get the idea. Like, that's not necessarily training weight, if you get what I'm getting at. And the knee injury sort of reinforces that idea to where he hasn't really been able to be active, not just in the cage, but outside of the cage too. And that really does worry me, because the one thing I will say about Jourdain Leavitt is he is always in the gym. If you've ever seen him on social media, he only posts pictures of him with the biggest smile on his face in the gym with the people who he trains with. So I do think that that is a key to this match.
There's a lot of different questions on this one. Again, for Leavitt, it's his first career loss. How much stock can you put into it? When you take on a guy that's like fighting in a mirror. I mean, Poyes and Leavitt, similar skill sets. Poyes maybe a little bit better of a striker. Leavitt can leave himself out there, but again, when he takes it to the ground, he's normally lights out. In all of the other 8 fights he has been. For Matt Sayles, He struggled against Moraes, but Moraes isn't going to take you down. He's going to stand there to strike with you. If you watch his fight against Zabit Magomedsharipov, you talk about a guy that was a fish out of water on the ground. It was Shaman. And I like Shaman when he's in the UFC.
Fun.
You and I got excited about him. With PFL, it didn't go so well for him either.
I got a comp that I need to ask you about with Matt Sayles because it's freshly in my mind. Does he kind of remind you of Antonina Shevchenko in this respect? His striking, it's okay. His wrestling's okay. I feel like it is the in-betweens for him. It's the scrambles he can get caught with. It is some of the strikers with, I guess, just more variety than your classic boxers who can catch them. I just want to get your opinion on that.
When I look at Sayles, the one thing that I had down in my notes that I really liked was the fact that he was one of those guys that he'll just slap the calf, slap the calf, slap the calf. Then he'll throw a teep out to the body, and he mixes things up well. We have a lot of different kickers on this card, and I'm going to talk about their kicks. It was a big part of my tape study, but you talked about it. I mean, JHK did the interview with the All-Star, and it came out today. So we're filming this on Monday. It came out today. When I was doing my notes for this one yesterday, there was only one interview available in the past, I don't know, year and a half. The last time Matt Sayles fought was a year and 11 months ago against Bryce Mitchell. So excuse anybody if it has been a little bit of a while. But with Sportskeeda's Frank Bonanda. So Frank, credit where it's due. We don't see enough of you. So, if you look at that one, Sayles talks about his footwork, he talks about a boxing approach, talks about his power. The whole lightweight thing is weird. So he said, listen, they got to get me a fight, I got to fight at lightweight. But why couldn't they give you a fight at featherweight? Like, I don't understand that one.
Do you think he's worried about his own weight cut?
Well, he missed weight his last time out.
Well,
he weighed 148.5 his last time out against Mitchell. Mitchell made weight. Mitchell submits him quick. I worry about that because for Sayles, again, this is a guy that uses footwork, movement, and speed to win fights. If you hurt your knee, however bad it was, because you didn't really give an approximation. It was just, I hurt my knee. There was a baby born in the last year, and I ballooned up. Now, this is the craziest part. Now, this wasn't Frank's fault. Frank's internet connection in that interview is really good. Matt Sayles' interview connection, from what I could tell, actually wasn't very good. Because I thought it was a mistake when he goes, I weighed 200 pounds. And I thought, okay, he said 208. But JHK in that interview, you hear it clear as day. He says 250 pounds. So kind of crazy. I'm assuming, again, here's the thing. For the fans to know, I'll break the fourth wall for you. Cub Swanson, terrible ACL injury before his Pineda fight.
It was during the quintet match that happened specifically on Fight Pass.
So when he fights Pineda, he's coming back from the knee thing. I figured Pineda's going to kick his knee off, and he tried to, and then Swanson comes back and knocks him out. And with Alex Bahunin, he does those humanizing athletes. Cub Swanson says, what's my favorite knockout to ever watch? It's my knockout over Daniel Pineda. Great one in that one. Lost his last fight. But still, it's kind of neat because a guy later in his career, injury, not that big of a deal. You look at it last weekend, Tony Kelly tears his rotator cuff 6 months ago. Couldn't jab anymore in camp. What does he do in his fight? I assumed a guy that his whole game is built around having a long jab. He comes out there and fights Randy Costa, and all he does is blitz him and take him down. So, again, I can be proven wrong by the way that people fight. Injuries normally scare me away, so I have to kind of take this with a fresh approach. Okay, he says he got up there to 250. Is he just kind of, telling a story, telling a tale? And at the same time, he had that long layoff. Baby, injuries, so on and so forth. It's really hard to look too far into it. So, Matt, we look at the odds for this one. Matt Sayles coming in here off of a very, very long layoff. Matt Sayles open to plus 185 underdog. They're pick'em odds right now. So, do we even bother mentioning Jordan Leavitt? I mean, he opened to minus 220. Now we're here. The Topology votes, we haven't looked at them. 847 total votes, 85% Leavitt, with 62% saying he's going to win by submission. For the 15% saying Sayles, 57% by decision. Matt Allen, I ask you, 100%. Forget about the weight. Forget about the knee injuries. If we just focused on this fight and it happened a year and a half ago, what would you say?
Well, I wouldn't really know a lot about Jordan Leavitt a year and a half ago, unfortunately. But what I will say is that here's the problem with Matt Sayles. Whatever version you think you're going to get of him, at this weight class, he's probably not going to look like that same guy. And that's what does worry. That's what does worry me. Because here's the thing about Sayles. You might say, oh, forget about the weight gain, forget about the injury and some of the things he said in that interview. It's really hard not to, because all of the examples and the reasons that he gave make 100% sense. Like, okay, I have a family now. I got injured. My priorities might be a little bit different. I might not necessarily have enough time to, dedicate myself 100% to training, be it because of the injury or because of the family. I do worry about him making this kind of a return after such a long layoff. And the thing about Leavitt is that I don't like the holes in his game on the feet, but I do think that he will be able to eventually get a takedown on Sayles. And with Leavitt, I think he'll only need one, maybe not to finish the fight, but at least to do enough. Because if Leavitt can get 2 takedowns in this fight, I think he'll be at least dominant enough in that top position to win rounds.
I disagree, and this is the only thing that I'll say. I looked at it, Matt Sayles. Now, numbers-wise, he's had 3 fights in the UFC, so you got to really break them all down. Shimon Moraes went 0-4 of takedown attempts.
He was tired, though, and wrestled in the 3rd round.
Matt Sayles was a quick knockout king when he came into MMA. I was actually impressed by that Matt Sayles turned it on in the 3rd round, defended the takedowns, albeit tired, but
Shimon had bad cardio.
For a guy that's not a wrestler, I like to see that. Kyle Nelson, he's going to try and take you down. He fought Diego Ferreira on short notice for his UFC debut, wild stuff, but in that fight, Kyle goes 2 of 10.
Here's my issue, though. Neither one of those guys are currently in the UFC.
And if you look at it, I mean, Bryce Mitchell only needed 1. Here's the other crazy thing about Matt Sayles. That episode of Dana White's Contender Series Season 2, here's some of the names that were on that card. Dwight Grant gets a UFC contract. PFL millionaire Emiliano Sordi, he's on that card. Ryan Spann beats Sordi.
That was a stacked card.
Austin Springer fights Giga Chikadze. Jordan Wright's on that card, fighting Fluffy Hernandez. Matt Sayles is in the main event fighting Yazan Haji.
Are we sure that wasn't like a fight night card?
I promise you it wasn't. So for Sayles, it's just crazy to see that. And oh, by the way, you want one other crazy thing? He was also the favorite in all 3 of his UFC fights. Shimon Moraes, he was a favorite. Kyle Nelson, he was a favorite. He was a slight favorite to beat friggin' Bryce Mitchell. That's my problem. You can't throw all the positives away. I know his record now is 8-3, and he's 1-2 in the UFC, and he's been away for a very long time. Matt Sayles is a good striker. Jordan Wright is a wonky striker.
We can say he's not a good one, Craig.
Matt Sayles has decent takedown defense, albeit, again, you got to realize what those fights are. Jordan Leavitt is just going to go takedown after takedown after takedown. So at the end of the day, we've talked a lot about a lightweight fight between Jordan Leavitt and Matt Sayles on the prelims of the last card in 2021.
Yeah,
maybe it's because it means a lot to us. Maybe it's because there's MVP caliber, votes on the line. But when we're picking this fight, again, so what are you saying here?
Jordan Leavitt is the naturally bigger man. He's the better wrestler. And I really do think it's going to be one of those cases of he needs 1 takedown and he can control the rest of the round with that 1 takedown. Yes, it might be difficult for him to achieve that 1 takedown, but I still think he might only go 1 for 4, let's say, for takedowns in the first round. But let's say he gets that last takedown with 3 minutes left. I do expect him to ride out those last 3 minutes on top. And I do worry about his striking, but here's the thing. I think he'll be able to eat the power of a smaller guy, at least early on. Yes, later on in the fight, it might get interesting, but if Leavitt does make it to the 3rd round, I'm going to assume he's had some wrestling dominance up until that point, so we should get a lesser version of Sayles by the 3rd.
And Sayles, in those interviews, knows exactly what he's up against. He knows that Leavitt's going to wrestle, but Sayles is one of the better wrestlers he's faced, and Sayles, the 2nd biggest mover and shaker on this card at 51%. I've got Jordan Leavitt in this fight. Again, I agree. I think he's going to go takedown, 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 takedown. And we'll see how the wrestling holds up for Sayles because it has been good throughout his career. So if you can make a good case for Sayles, hopefully I've laid it out for you. He's a great striker. He's lights out in 3 different ways with just his right hand. He's like a sushi chef. He's like Devison Figueiredo. He's great with that right hand, but he has very, very good leg kicks. And if he can defend the takedowns, you might want to go with Matt Sayles. I've got Jordan Leavitt. Matt's got Jordan Leavitt in this fight, thinking the takedowns are going to be the difference, thinking there's going to be a submission. We've seen Sayles, albeit against Bryce Mitchell, struggle against a grappler, and he was a bigger man in that fight. So, Matt, we have a big-time card coming up. You let us know who you've got in these fights down below in the comments section. I can't wait for it because in the main event, oh boy, what are you saying there?
It's going to be a phenomenal fight. Chris Daukaus has by far the biggest opportunity of his career against the guy who is coming off a title shot in Derrick Lewis. It's going to be a phenomenal fight. And hey, I'm not normally one who's out here saying, hey, heavyweights should be main events, but I think this is a phenomenal Fight Night main event.
Main event that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. We always say,
let's get into it.
In life, as in the UFC, unranked heavyweights usually get co-main event slots. I mean, Andre Arlovski fought Carlos Felipe. Marcos Rogerio de Lima just fought Ben Rothwell in a co-main event slot. But sometimes on Fight Night cards, we get them on the undercard. And this weekend, we have Lord Kong, Don'Tale Mayes, taking on Josh Parisian. Now, I ask you this. We have Lord Kong, we have Josh Parisian. Later on this card, we happen to have Justin Tafa taking on Harry Hunsucker. Here's my question, Matt. Would it make a lot more sense if they matched up Don'Tale Mayes and Justin Tafa and Harry Hunsucker and Josh Parisian? Would those be better fights match made?
I mean, if the UFC wants to put on fun and competitive fights, then yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, so when I look at this fight, and the reason why I say that is because if you look at Josh Parisian, he has one win in the UFC. It's over Roque Martinez, who's 0-3 in the UFC. If you look at Don'Tale Mayes, he has one win in the UFC. It's over Roque Martinez, who has an 0-3 record in the UFC, and that's a problem. When you look at Parisian, he's one of those guys that had chance and chance and chance. Again, he was on Contender Series. He beat Greg Rebello, first round knockout. They put him on, The Ultimate Fighter. He doesn't end up winning there, so he ends up in Contender Series again after some fights outside of the promotion, and he ends up booking his ticket to the UFC. And really, he was in a rough spot because he loses on The Ultimate Fighter. He goes to fight on the regional scene. He gets Brett Martin. You're going to see Brett Martin in the UFC one day. He just has to pick it up and fight a little bit more, and it's not his fault. He had a lot of fight bookings fall out. He's a good fighter. He beats Josh Parisian, so Parisian has to win a lot of fights on the regional scene. He does. He makes it to the UFC. And then he takes on a tough enough test in Parker Porter. Now, at the time, we, and I think a lot of people, but we didn't have a great sense of Parker Porter. We made a lot of jokes at his expense. He fought John Jones years ago. Turns out Parker Porter's not that bad, eh?
He is pretty good. He is pretty good. I'll give him that credit.
All right, so we look at Josh Parisian, and the only thing that I have to say that's halfway negative is the fact that he just reminds me of an old-timey heavyweight, like a heavyweight from 12 or 13 years ago, because he's 6'4". His last time out, he weighed 266. That's stuff that you don't see all that often anymore. I mean, Don'Tale Mayes, he's 6'6", 262. Sometimes he weighs less, sometimes he weighs a little bit more. But he's a really big heavyweight that trains at Jackson Wink, and main training partner is Christian Edwards, a guy that can bang. The one thing that I found out, Matt, when I was doing my tape study for this one, and then really kind of doing the deep dive of the social media accounts, Josh Parisian actually brought in a really good heavyweight to kind of acclimate himself and get used to a guy like Don'Tale Mayes. I don't know if you saw it.
I did not. I'd love to know.
Daddy Longlegs Daniel Spitz, who is 6'7" and has an 82-inch reach. I think that's the perfect guy. A little bit of boxing, a little bit of length, a little bit of Don'Tale Mayes.
It will be really interesting, but this is my problem with this fight. It's a classic I don't really know, if I'm being completely honest. Because here's the thing. Don'Tale Mayes has the better hand technique, I would say. Just strike for strike. His strikes do look very good in the heavyweight division. But this is my weird problem with Don'Tale Mayes, and I wonder if this is something you picked up on too. I'm sure it is. His accuracy's not good on the feet. Like, at all. For someone who we talk about who has great boxing, I always think about guys like Calvin Kattar, Max Holloway. People who get from point A to point B and land on their target when they take those shots. With Don'Tale Mayes, I almost compare him a little bit to Zabit, where it's like, yeah, the strikes look very nice when you're throwing them, but what is the effect when they do land? Now, yes, I would not want to be hit by Don'Tale Mayes. There's a lot of awful things in life that I'd probably rather do than get hit once clean by Don'Tale Mayes. But can you really rely on that one big shot in the heavyweight division in the year 2021? Because what you brought up about Josh Parisian being sort of that old school kind of a heavyweight is very true. But the same thing has to be said for Don'Tale Mayes too. Because when you look at Mayes, yes, he's got big power. Yes, he has, we'll say, average takedown defense, let's say, although grappling isn't a huge part of his game. With Josh Parisian, what I will say about him though is the thing that sets him apart from the average sort of 2006 heavyweight, if you will, I think he does have better cardio than those older heavyweights. I do think he can string together at least decent volume on the outside and do things on the in-betweens, because how many times do we sit here and say, heavyweight division, the fight's gonna be great for one round, and then we don't really know what it's gonna look like. What I do like with Josh Parisian is that at least in those 2 rounds when both guys are tired, when we're not getting the best version of both guys, Parisian will at least still be throwing strikes.
Parisian can throw a lot of volume. He can press the action up against the cage. He can kind of take guys down. Now, again, stats might lie because they might not support that, but he does have a fair amount of finish wins from the bottom. Some DKOs, some ground and pound, so on and so forth. But again, I mean, looking at the notes, I figure, okay, leg kicks are going to be key. Don'Tale Mayes doesn't kick all that much. Josh Parisian, a little bit more of a kicker, but that's trouble for me. I look at Parisian, a little bit more of a complete skill set. Don'Tale Mayes' boxing really sets him apart. It's just establishing the distance in a fight like this.
And my thing is, too, I agree with you. I think Parisian, again, this is one of those fights, if we stacked all their skills up next to each other, Parisian probably would be the more skilled fighter at the end of the day. But what I do worry about, again, this was a Joe Roganism when Mark Hunt fought Junior Dos Santos. It's that Junior's the better mixed martial artist, but you're fighting a kickboxer in an MMA fight that's probably going to be a kickboxing fight because Junior might have ground skills. It's not like he's really going to use them though, so he is going to fight the other fighter at his game. That's what I worry about with Parisian because do I think he's the better fighter than Mays? Probably. But do I still think he's going to find himself in a lot of boxing exchanges throughout this fight? Yeah, I do. And do I worry about him walking into a big shot? Yeah, I worry about that a lot.
So when we look at this one in terms of the odds, Mays open a -140 favorite. He is now a -202 average on best fight odds. You look at it for Parisian, open a +120, he's a +165. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Surprised us, they are to you. I'm going to set the over-under at 67.5% Mays. What are you saying?
I think Parisian will be the favorite with the Tapology voters. Not at all.
Well, that's kind of insane. 833 total votes, 67% Mays, 56% by decision, 39% by knockout for the 33% that have Parisian, 47% by decision, 40% by knockout. The reason why I said 67.5, I figured, okay, it's 65% or it's 70. I'll aim in the middle, cut it in the middle, and they also ended up in the middle. So that's kind of crazy. And Bill behind the way with the cards. We're going to need to see them, so bring them up. Yeah, Matt, when I look at this fight, I do have a hard time with it. Again, Don'Tale Mayes, the thing is, he has to throw in volume, switch stances, throw a little bit of a kick. I haven't seen that through his UFC career. Josh Parisian, you know, you talk about the level of competition. Well, Lord Kong's the one that fought the champ. So there is that. He did have the fight against Cyril Gane. He did all right in some of the striking exchanges. He didn't do all right when it hit the mat. He took on Rodrigo Nascimento. He got submitted, but that's going to happen when you take on Zé Colmeia. But other than that, I mean, for me, I like Ricardo Prezel. I thought he was going to end up in the UFC over Don'Tale Mayes. Didn't happen. Again, Don'Tale had multiple opportunities on Contender Series. You had Parisian on Contender Series tough and Contender Series again. So when we look at this one, are you going with the guy that had a knockout loss to Alan Crowder? Or are you going to go for the guy that's lost to, I don't know, Parker Porter? What's the pick?
Okay, I'm going to look dumb no matter what the pick is because this is just going to be one of those fights. I just thought of that point about, hey, Parisian's probably the better fighter, but it's going to be a lot of boxing right near the end. So I don't know if I totally buy into my own point, but I do think I have to pick Josh Parisian because this is the point about Parisian that does just set him apart from your average unranked heavyweight. He has a good level of activity. Now, does it sometimes get him caught against really good fighters? Yes, it does. Like, if you ever fought Francis Ngannou, I see him probably rushing in there trying to throw one quick jab, getting hit with the biggest overhand right you've ever seen, and the fight would probably be over faster than McGregor versus Jose Aldo. But I think in this fight, with Mays' lack of accuracy, I actually do think Parisian, if he can just stay somewhat sound defensively and do a similar game plan to what we saw Pena employ against Amanda Nunes. If I'm throwing at you, you will not be throwing back at me because you'll be more focused on your defense. And I think that will be a big key for Parisian.
I've got Parisian in here, and especially if he's going to make this fight boring. If he can really press it up, slow it down, then Mays isn't able to establish his distance. That's the way to win, and especially against a heavyweight that doesn't tend to throw a lot of kicks. Not that heavyweights really do, but I think if Mays comes in there and actually does whip it out there, you're going to see a very new and impressive guy, especially if that's a tool that he's added to his tool chest. I don't know if Mays is going to be one of those fighters too. I mean, you look at it, Jackson Wink. Yeah, there's some bigger fighters. Jones isn't there anymore, though. I know he's going to split it, Jackson Wink, he says, and fight ready. But for me, I like Parisian. I like that Spitz connection for this fight. And I think training with a bigger guy instead of where Mays, the Christian Edwards connection, I think that it's going to pay dividends for Parisian. So, listen, not really the strongest of feelings.
I'll say this, if Don'Tale Mayes whips his tool out, though, this will be a very different fight.
But when I look at this one, I mean, not the most strong feelings, I guess, either way. I don't like Don'Tale Mayes at a 2-1 favorite where, again, both of these guys, their only wins in the UFC are over Roque Martinez, who lost to both of these guys, and Alexander Romanov.
I feel like this needs to be said, though, and this is more of like a Tai Tuivasa public service announcement. I used to think Tai Tuivasa was kind of on this level with the Don'Tale Mayes, the Josh Parisians. If you want to throw kind of Parker Porter in there, Justin Tafa, Harry Hunsucker, I thought he was just sort of part of that grouping of the heavyweight division. But finally, he has set himself apart, and Tai Tuivasa has made sort of a special career for himself. So it is nice to see him climb out of this region of the division.
An ode to Tuivasa. Both of us going with the underdog here in Josh Parisian. Are we right? Are we wrong? We'll find out on Saturday. You let us know down below who you have in this fight and the rest of the fights on this card. You brought it up. Tafa's fighting Hunsucker. And in the main event, Ooh, boy, a couple of bangers. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. For those of you on the Underground Whisper Network, the Dorf announcement came out 6 days ago from this Monday as Julia Vila no longer in the fight. We have Raquel Pennington taking on Macy Chiasson. An ode and a thank you to the Netherlands' own Marcel Dorf, a guy who is a must-follow on Twitter, on Instagram, a friend of the show even. But now we look at this fight between Macy Chiasson, representing Fortis MMA, taking on Colorado's own former title challenger, Raquel Pennington. And if you look at it, both of these ladies chasing Juliana Peña's title. How insane is that? Congratulations to the Venezuelan Vixen. But when we look at this fight, again, originally Pennington taking on Chiasson, well, no, you have Julia Vila. And if you look at Julia Vila's skill set, how does that match up with Macy Chiasson's? Well, it doesn't at all.
Like oil and water.
It does not one bit, because for Avila, yeah, she can strike. Yeah, she can throw some nice kicks, but the big bread and butter portion of her game is when it hits the mat, whether she's taken down or she takes you down, she's going to do some work with her jiu-jitsu. So, unfortunate for Oklahoma's geologist that we don't get this fight, but now we look at this one where Macy Chiasson's been in this point before. She took on the Elbow Queen. It was in Copenhagen, which was a stone's throw from Malmo. And if you want to have fun on a Saturday night, you want to toss in some of these things that I'm talking about, Lena Landsberg is from Malmo. Copenhagen's across the road. Throw the rock, hit the border, and there you go. Boom, Bob's your uncle. And so it was a hometown fight for Lena Landsberg. Macy Chiasson had fought away from the States in the past. She fought in Canada. She took on Sarah Morris. She won that fight. So who's to say that when you go to Europe, you're not going to win? Well, Lena Landsberg, she was the Elbow Queen. She won that fight. Now, Matt, since then, so many question marks around Chiasson, around her cardio, around her takedown defense, around the fact that she can kind of get controlled against the cage. And she's really kind of thrown those two things out the window in those last two wins. So if you look at it, she beat Shanna Young, who was another short notice fighter. She beats Marion Renault. She didn't just beat Marion Renault. And I know Marion over 40, but man, Macy Chiasson looked really good in that fight.
She did, and she is starting to put it all together. At least it feels like that looking in from the outside. Because with Chiasson, you knew how good she was on The Ultimate Fighter. Of course, she won it, but she faced a fairly good level of competition on there too. Like, that was a good season. Heavy hitters. I don't know if you're ever watching, but Macy did prove that, okay, I might not be a featherweight because it didn't feel like anybody who was on that season actually stayed at the featherweight division, but when I do move down to 135, I can make a real difference to the division, and it hasn't always been great, like you said. There are some weaknesses in her game, but at least as of late, although the level of competition might not be all that high, she has seemed to start to iron out some of those wrinkles. Against Shayna Young, she beat the brakes off her, and that's really not even worth mentioning, but against Marion Renault, she was forced to defensive takedown. She was forced to at least create separation and damage with her own shots, and I thought she did a phenomenal job with that. This is why I think this is one of the most intriguing fights on the card. I think this is as one-way traffic of a fight as there is on this card. I think Raquel Pennington, her game plan has got to be, make this fight boring. Hold Macy up against the cage. If I get a takedown, use the takedown. If not, it's not the end of the world. Just put out the fire that Macy's striking causes. But if Macy can just create a little bit of separation and force Raquel Pennington to strike with her in the middle of the cage, it's going to look awful. Like, she's going to be able to hit her, tee off on her in whichever way she wants to, and she might even be able to get the TKO.
This is the craziest part about this. Macy Chiasson beat Pannie Kianzad, wins the Ultimate Fighter. Raquel Pennington took on Pannie Kianzad her last time out, and I put myself in my own shoes and went, okay, I remember how I felt before that fight. I thought Pannie Kianzad was going to win. I thought she was going to light her up from the outside. And what happened? Raquel Pennington fought a Raquel Pennington fight.
She don't play those games.
She did the same thing against Irene Aldana, even though, again, it was a split decision, so you could go either way with that. And then the other win that she has peppered in since her resurgence of 2019 to now is Marion Renault. The only loss out of those 4 fights is to Holly Holm.
And that was a close fight.
That was a close fight. So I look at this, I look at all my notes, Matt, and again, this is the weirdest part of it. Macy Chiasson was supposed to fight this past summer against Aspen Ladd. We make a video for it. Macy Chiasson hurts her foot. She's out of the fight. They remake the fight for, what was it, October? She's supposed to fight Aspen Ladd again. All of a sudden, I pick up an accent there for 2 seconds. She's supposed to fight Aspen Ladd. We'll go East Coast Canadian back to it. And unfortunately, Aspen Ladd misses weight. Yeah. So, Macy doesn't accept the fight. I'm cool with that. You don't want to fight somebody that shows up and can't make the weight. That's fine. I'm not going to discredit it. Now, obviously, you're going from a big fight against Aspen Ladd to the prelims here, but it's still a big fight against a former title challenger, but it's still on very short notice. What happens to Aspen Ladd? She gets main event. She loses, but she gets main event. So, Matt, we've seen this before. Macy's fought fighters like this before. Raquel's fought plenty of fighters like this before. You want to see a tough strength of schedule? You bring up the Topology or the Sherdog page for Raquel Pennington. You go over the names there. She fought Jessica Andrade years ago. So when I look at the odds for this one, Matt, Pennington open to minus 300 favorite. She's minus 210 right now. For Chiasson, open to plus 50? She's plus 160 right now. We look at the Topology votes. Surprise us, they already do. I'm going to set the over-under at 75% Pennington. What would you say?
Again, I'm not trying to be a hipster, but I think this is going to be one of the weird ones where the underdog's the favorite, no?
696 total votes, 62% Pennington, 91% by decision. For the 38% that I have Chiasson, 82% by decision. So the fans are saying decision, and I'm saying decision Pennington. It's going to be another one of those ones where she pushes the pace, pushes the fight up against the cage, and really negates the 4-inch height and 5-inch reach advantage of Chiasson in this one.
I definitely think Pennington could do that. And even in the loss to Holly Holm, she did demonstrate those skills. She held Holm up against the cage. Now, the weird thing about Holm is that if you want to make it boring, she's got like the Uno reverse card where Holly Holm's like ultimate game plan is make the fight as boring as possible. Whoever would have thought. But Holm was able to sort of out-strength and out-position her way in some of those clinch exchanges. And I don't think Macy's going to be able to do that. I do agree with you. I think we're going to see a lot of forward pressure from Pennington. Now, what I will say though is that forward pressure is going to be met by strikes at some point. Macy is also one of the few true TKO threats in this division. So Raquel, in all likelihood, could get knocked out round 1, 2, or 3. Like, it's a real danger in this matchup, but I do like Pennington's ability to slow this fight down.
Macy Chiasson with those long-range weapons that pop at the end of her shot. You really like to see that. Maybe toss some kicks in there. This is a kick-heavy episode.
As a viewer, I would really like Macy to win just because I think it would probably result in a more exciting fight. But this is what I will say, just sort of the last point, and this speaks more to the division as a whole. This might not be as important as a fight as the Aspen Ladd fight would have been for Chiasson, but it kind of still is because of what happened over the weekend. The division's wide open again, and anybody feels like they're 1 or 2 fights away from the title shot. I know Amanda's probably going to get a rematch. I know that's going to cause a bit of a logjam. But other than Amanda being next in line for Pena, it is wide open after that because Pena herself hasn't fought a lot of those top contenders. So the winner of this fight really does put themselves in a great position to maybe not fight for the title next, but maybe fight title eliminator, maybe 2 more.
Big time fight coming up at bantamweight this weekend. Both of us going with Raquel Pennington to get the win on short notice for her opponent. Fortis MMA's Macy Chiasson. You let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this fight. You let us know about the rest of this card. It's a big time banger, and in the main event, you have Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. One of my absolute favorite fights coming up this weekend. We have Belle Quebec Canada's own Charles Jourdain qui va battre contre Andre Ewell. Now, Matt, we can do this in French. We can do this in English. I'm going to choose to do it in English, but hey, if you want to see French Fight Night Picks in 2022, you let me know, and I'll make it happen. I absolutely love this fight because you know what? It's Southpaw versus mostly Southpaw until we have to hit the panic button, and that one panic button is Mr. Charles Jourdain. Now, this is a guy that has a fight of the night against who? Duho Choi, where he finished him. He had a wild fight against Marcelo Rojo. You want an insane stat on this fight, Matt? Do you want it?
I would love it.
Do the fans at home want it? Do you want it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts? I'm going to give it to you because for Charles Jourdain, if you take his last fight against Julian Erosa, you spice it up a little bit. That one was a catch weight at 150 because it was short notice. I'm going to call it a featherweight fight anyway. So if we do that, we have a little bit of fun with it. Charles Jourdain has 6 knockdowns in his 6 UFC fights. If we're just considering featherweights and the greatest of all time, well, the number 1 up there with 11 knockdowns is Jeremy Stephens. But if you say that with 6 at featherweight, he's tied with Giga Chikadze, Shane Burgos, Teruto Ishihara, and Conor McGregor for the most knockdowns in featherweight history. If you go with 5 and you want to be like that, he's tied with Brian Ortega and Dennis Bermudez for 10th all time. So it's absolutely amazing what Jourdain has been able to do in his short time in the UFC. It's also amazing that this is his record right now in the UFC, and unfortunately for both of these men, I say this with no ounce of joy, they're probably fighting for their jobs this weekend.
It's wild that we're saying that now, because what, 2019, it felt like both these guys were destined to be in the rankings, and maybe not, you know, top 10, but at least like 15 to 10 range, where on their best day, they could beat anybody in the division, and on their worst day, hey, they might not always win. But with Jourdain, he's just shown holes in his game that he hasn't been able to fix, and he does feel like the same fighter now that he was when he first came into the UFC. And that's not a bad thing, because like you mentioned, those knockdown stats are ridiculous. But with Jourdain's stats, he's kind of like Russell Westbrook. You have to look a little bit more in depth than just the assist stats, because with Jourdain, the assist in his knockdowns for might look really good. He turns the ball over at a very high rate, though, and he gets knocked down at a very high rate, too. And that's what really worries me about Jourdain, because that stat really is a reflection more of his fighting style than just his absolute power. Because I agree, he does have very good power. He's got great boxing, great body shots, too. He's got great overhands, very legit knockdown power. But the reason he's able to sort of get that next level power is because he fights like Wanderlei Silva when he doesn't have to be. If Jourdain wanted to be a little bit more technical, I think he could be on the outside. He's shown in some of his fights to be a disciplined fighter who can put together combinations, who, when rolling downhill, almost looks like Giannis going to the basket. Like, Jourdain really is that dangerous of a striker. But the cardio is not great. When he faces adversity, I gotta be honest, I start to worry about how he's gonna look. And that's crazy, because if you go back to his debut, gets dropped in the first round by Doo Ho Choi, gets past that adversity, and then wins by knockout, now we're starting to see him fade in some of these tougher fights.
The thing that I don't necessarily like about Jourdain, and I'll go over all the things that I love. Matt, we didn't plan this, but I'm gonna throw a couple shots at you. When Jourdain faces adversity, block like Jourdain blocks. Oh no! But he kind of wilts and moves around, and he still gets hit through his guard because he just brings his hands in.
He doesn't look good. He doesn't take a shot well.
It doesn't look all that great. Now, for Andre Ewell, he can capitalize on that. Longest reach that you've ever seen in this division. And I mean, listen, when the highs have been high, Andre Ewell beats one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. That sounds ridiculous now because he's going to fight for Eagles FC. But Renan Barão. And then you look at the lowest of lows. He loses to Chris Gutierrez, knowing that the leg kick's going to be there, knowing that there might be a custody battle talked about by John Anik during the fight. Thanks. But you look at that, he loses to Gutierrez. So then he goes out there against Julio Arce. Julio Arce did the exact same thing as Chris Gutierrez. Started investing in the leg kicks to open up his hands. Now, that's an Arce staple. But I got to say, and it's probably because, you know, former common opponent, but Vince Morales gets his legs kicked off by Chris Gutierrez. What does Vince Morales do better now? Checking leg kicks and at least moving his feet and getting out of the way. For Andre Ewell, fight over fight, he didn't invest in at least a little bit of that defense. But again, same thing can be said for Charles Jourdain fight over fight.
I just think Andre Ewell's so tied to his ways because he is so boxing heavy, especially in MMA, that he does really plant heavy on his lead leg and even his back leg when he does decide to throw shots. So I think it's almost so ingrained into his style that there's kind of growing pains almost. Like he can't kind of learn the check because if I then learn the check, then I have to sort of redo the rest of my striking game. And that's my issue with Ewell, especially in this matchup. I don't love sort of the defensive inconsistencies, I guess, from Charles Jourdain. But how I see this fight going is a lot of forward pressure from Jourdain, him throwing a lot of those looping shots, and him throwing a lot of body kicks and leg kicks. Two things that we don't really see a lot from Andre Ewell.
Best body kick from a southpaw you're ever going to see from Charles Jourdain. It's like somebody spamming it on UFC 4.
And we see body kicks a lot in MMA, but it's very rare that someone has that kick that can put their opponent down with it. But Jourdain really has that kicking power to where if he hits you clean, you're going to go down because of it. And Andre Ewell has shown not even just susceptibility to being kicked in the body and the legs before. He just doesn't he doesn't react well when he gets hit in the body. He's been hurt to the body in the past, and I worry about that being a recurring theme in this matchup because let's say their boxing is somewhat even. I definitely give Ewell the edge, but I think with Jourdain's sort of uglier, grimier style, he may make things even with the hands. Then I think about Andre Ewell. What's his plan B on the feet? Well, he doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He doesn't throw a lot of knees. He'll throw some knees up the middle, I guess. And he throws a few elbows if guys get close. At least with Jourdain, he'll throw the leg kick. He'll throw the body kick. He'll go up high with his punches. I can at least see a progression of his striking. And I can see from, okay, this is what Jourdain wants to look like in round 1. And this is what he'd like to look like in round 3.
Jourdain open a minus 225 favorite. He's roughly a minus 205 right now in best fight odds. You look at it for Ewell, open a plus 190, plus 170 or thereabouts. So look at the Tapology votes. I don't expect them to be close, but I'm going to say over under 80% Jourdain.
I'll say slightly under.
All right, we're looking at them. 839 total votes, 86% Jourdain, 59% by knockout for the 14% that have Ewell, 67% by decision. Again, for Ewell, wins over Irwin Rivera, Jonathan Martinez, both those by split. Everybody's going to yell at you till the cows come home that J Mart won that fight. And then in the 5-on-in, the 3 losses, Marlon Vera by finish, Chris Gutierrez by decision, Julio Arce by finish. For Jourdain, the 5-on-in. Duho Choi, the knockout win. A loss by split to Andre Feely. He did not win that fight. A split draw against Josh Culibao, but was there 10-8? I don't know. Then he fights Marcelo Rojo. Way too close of a fight than you'd want.
Great fight, though. Like, highly recommend watching.
And then his last time out, he fights Julian Erosa, and Julian would not get out of his face, and Julian ends up just sinking one of those classic Erosa submissions. So, for me, I look at this one. I have Jourdain, but at minus 200, I stay away and I watch it. And also, happy belated birthday to Charles Jourdain, who just turned, 26 in the last 3 weeks.
So I have Jourdain for all the reasons that Julian Erosa beat Jourdain. Who's going to be the one pressuring forward in this fight? Well, probably Jourdain. I know he faced someone in his last fight who was moving forward on him, but still, Julian Erosa only knows one thing, and that is forward pressure in the cage. And to bang. With Jourdain, I think he'll be the one going into range on Ewell. So yes, he's going to have to worry about those long-range counter shots, but other than the one or two big moments Ewell might have in this fight, I do think Jourdain will be the more consistent one. I can't believe I'm saying those words, but if he can stay dedicated to the leg kick, and if he does use kicks in this fight, especially early on, I think Jourdain will put himself in a great position to win.
You got a couple of guys who have been chintzy at best in their last number of fights. You also have Andre Ewell making the move up to featherweight for this one. Could pay dividends for him, but again, expect a slightly smaller fighter. He's a guy that's built like Matt and I. Very, very Slenderman-esque in his build. We have a big-time fight coming up this weekend, and both of us, surprisingly enough, going with the Canadian Charles Jourdain to bring that win back to Beloeil in that Montreal region. I can't wait for this fight, and Matt, up at the top, we have Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus, and I know you're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. Coming up this weekend, flyweights tangle as we have a resurgence. Sijara Eubanks looking to make it 2 in a row in the return back to 125 pounds, taking on the Brazilian phenom. And yes, I say phenom. That is Melissa Gatto. When I look at it for Gatto, little bit of an unknown commodity coming into the UFC. I know a lot of people hyped her up. I was looking forward to her fights. You look at her last fight on the regional scene. She submits Carol Hossa off of her back. It was an amazing one. And then I went back and watched all of the tape. And I'm not going to throw it back to that prediction video for her UFC debut. But I have this to say out of all of it. Very long layoff, very young, poor striking on the regional scene, terrible takedown defense, able to do things off her back, but close fights against not great fighters. And I was unimpressed with the Melissa Gatto that I read about compared to the Gatto whose fights I watched. So I was tuned in, locked and loaded when she was out there for her last time out, being her debut 4 months ago against Victoria Leonardo. And I said in that video, I won't be surprised if she makes advancements in her game. I have this to say to you, Matt, because you picked Gatto, but again, it was still relatively unknown, right? I had no idea that she was going to look as good as she did in that fight.
And no one really did. I know I predicted Gatto, but it was mainly based on her competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments, kind of apart from MMA. Like, it had nothing to do with her MMA career. But to see that she is starting to form into an actually promising MMA talent is a really exciting thing to happen, because at this division, it's sort of become stagnant right now. I know there's a few prospects right now who are starting to come up, Aaron Blanchfield being one of them, especially over the weekend. But when you have a champion who's so dominant, there's always a need for new up-and-coming contenders. And I do feel like Gatto, at least this weekend, has a great opportunity to finally become one of those big prospects, because she is fighting Sijara Eubanks, a fighter who, to be fair, I think the MMA community as a whole doesn't have a great read on Sijara Eubanks, because you look at her record, she's 7-6, like, she's almost 500. Normally fighters with records like that aren't spoken about like Sijara Eubanks is spoken about, but if you actually go and watch her fights and at least consider her level of competition, she is a much better fighter than that 7-6 would suggest, because what she demonstrated against Elise Reed, and yes, I understand, Elise Reed probably shouldn't have been in there with Sijara Eubanks.
Strawweight, on short notice, has a fight against Orion Starr.
But if you see just how good Sijara Eubanks looked in that fight, you kind of get the idea of just how promising of, I guess, a potential champion she could have been all those years ago. Because I feel like Eubanks, you don't want to say self-sabotage, because that speaks to a fighter's mindset, but there's been a lot of oh-by-the-ways with her throughout her career that I do feel like have prevented her from reaching her full potential. Because let's say if we play back Eubanks' career 10 times, do you think she would always be an unranked in-between flyweight, bantamweight all 10 of those times? Probably not. I would assume at least 5 of those she's in the top 10 of one of those two divisions, if not both, honestly, because Let me just break down the X's and O's for Eubanks. She's a great offensive wrestler, has very strong hips and really good body takedowns too. Doesn't just rely on the single and double leg, can get it done from the clinch. She has great power punches for this division, has great volume striking, I would say. But there's a big problem with Sijara Eubanks, and it's that her cardio and her volume, I'd say they start at a promising level. You look at her, she's whipping out the jab. When that third round comes, she might have like Dada 5000 cardio. Like it really does fall off a cliff, and that's what worries me about this matchup with Gatto, because I think Eubanks can go out there and look great for the first 10 minutes. But if she's not able to finish someone who is so tricky on the mat in those last 5 minutes when she is tired, she's going for some of those sloppy takedowns. Even look back at the Roxanne fight. I know she beat Roxanne quite handily, but still, near the end of that fight, Montefiore was able to at least out-grapple her in some areas. And I'm not saying Gatto's the mixed martial artist Roxanne is, but you can at least see some areas where she can have success in the grappling.
For Eubanks, it's 7-6, or is it 8-6? 8-6 would count that 3-rounder on the Ultimate Fighter. For Gatto, such an advancement in her last fight against Leonardo, who is like the equivalent of a Justin Gaethje in this division. She'll get drawn into the brawl. You look at it for Eubanks, I mean, the move down to 125, was it the biggest, most planned thing ever? Well, she was supposed to fight who, Matt? Carol Hossa earlier on this year. That fight falls out. So then she's supposed to fight Priscilla Cachoeira. That fight falls out. Then she's supposed to fight, well, Elise Reed, and that fight happens. Then she was supposed to fight on October 16th against, well, Luana Carolina. Sijara Eubanks was in Vegas, and then unfortunately COVID protocols, Eubanks is out. And then, you know, the Mexican-Canadian Lupita Godinez gets that fight, and it didn't go all that well for her. So we look at the odds for this one. For Gatto, the underdog, but she opened a -130 favorite. She is a +172 underdog right now. For Eubanks, opened a +111 underdog. She's a -212 favorite. If we look at the votes on Topology, surprised us there to you. Look at that, 800 votes, 70%
Wow.
Gatto, 65% by decision, 24% by submission. For the 30% that have Eubanks, 79% by decision. Matt, the odds have swayed heavily in the favor of one Sarge Eubanks at a 57% clip. The biggest mover and shaker on this card, by the way. Matt, Sijara Eubanks, when she gets people down, you're in trouble. That Elise Reed fight, ground and pound, tons of trouble. And the most underrated part of Eubanks' game is her grappling towards her jiu-jitsu. Melissa Gatto is sneaky on the ground. I have a hard time with this one. I'm going with the underdog and the younger fighter, Melissa Gatto, because I think the long-range weapons and the stick-to-itiveness are going to get it done for her in this fight. I really prefer having her at 125 at almost 26 years old than I do at an almost 37-year-old Eubanks.
This is the only fight where I think weight really is going to matter, so I'll put that up as a disclaimer right now. I gotta be honest, I think Sijara Eubanks is the top 5 fighter in this division. She just hasn't had the opportunity to show it yet. When I look at the top 5 of the women's flyweight division, you have people in there like Lauren Murphy, like Jessica I. You can't tell me Sijara Eubanks wouldn't put on extremely competitive performances, if not be favored against some of those fighters. Because at 125 pounds, no one's been able to out-grapple her yet. No one's been able to out-strike her yet. I really do think that this is a fighter who, at this weight, when everything is right, she truly is one of the best fighters at this division. So I have to pick Eubanks. But again, more than any other fight on this card, I have to say this. If she looks terrible on weigh-in day, or if she misses weight by 4 pounds, 3 pounds, even 1 pound, there's a good chance I switch my pick. I just think with Eubanks, her physical strength is really unmatched at this division other than Jessica Andrade. She has phenomenal wrestling defense, so I think it'll be very hard for Gatto to get her to the mat if she doesn't like the striking range. And if Sijara really wants to get some of that ground and pound off, Gatto is someone who will spend a lot of time on her back trying to set up her submissions, and I don't think Eubanks is going to give her some of that time to stall and really set up for the big action. I think Eubanks is going to make her pay a lot, and what's the quote? You punch a black belt in the head once, it turns them into a brown belt, and then turns them into a purple belt and a blue belt. I think Eubanks will be able to follow that game plan.
I've got the classic Polyana Viana approach with Melissa Gatto. I think she's going to get it done. Matt is going with Sarge, who's in charge of Sijara Eubanks. That's a pick for Matt. And I'm really looking forward to this fight. We're going to learn a lot about this division and how things are going to shake out. Maybe the winner gets a Miranda Maverick. I think that one might be in the cards. I absolutely love this one and the rest of our card. Hey, Wonder Boy's fighting Bilal Muhammad in the co-main event. Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus in the main. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. absolute wonky wreck of a fight coming up this weekend at heavyweight. If you have some galaxy-brained idea of how either one of these guys is going to win, you let me know, because this is going to be a sloppy, striking mess. Between the Hurricane Harry Hunsucker's second time out with the promotion, he is 0-1 against Australians in the UFC. He is taking on an Australian in the 1-3 UFC fighter, Dustin Tafa. You pepper in 3 wins, he's 4-3 overall in his young MMA career. He is billed as a striker. He has had some good fights in the UFC. If you look at it, his fight against Carlos Felipe, those boys just put head to head and they went full box mode. And it was a lot of fun. It was rock'em sock'em robots. You love to see that. His UFC debut at Marvel Stadium, that was the Adesanya Whitaker card in front of friends and family. He gets knocked out by Yorgan De Castro on the back foot.
No. He didn't only get knocked out by Yorgan De Castro on the back foot. Yorgan had his eyes closed when he landed that shot. It's even worse.
And I mean, listen, if you want to play catch-up, Jargis Danho, the Man Mountain, beat Yorgan De Castro. So there's crazier things that have happened. He then knocks out Juan Adams. That's also on a pay-per-view. Main card. Then he loses a split decision to Carlos Felipe. And then his last time out, he loses the decision to Jared Vanderaa. In just an overall, like, it was kind of surprising, the performance.
This is what I have to say about Justin Tafa. I think we were onto the Justin Tafa train really early, to be honest, because I have a very weird memory, Craig, you probably know this, and I can remember some things very clearly, especially if there's a strong emotion tied to it. With Justin Tafa, I remember his early videos so well because I was kind of surprised the UFC signed him, if I'm being completely honest. At least in his earlier MMA fights before he did come to the big promotion, he didn't really show me enough skills to really prove that, hey, you belong to be on the big stage, because let's call a spade a spade. Justin Tafa was getting taken down by guys who didn't even really belong in the division before he came to the UFC.
But when it got back up to the feet, he'd light them up.
Exactly, and that's the thing about Tafa. When you are in that kickboxing range, he is as deadly as any fighter in this division. But this is the thing I always feel like when we talk about Justin Tafa. You can beat him unless you fight his fight. Now, I understand that's easier said than done, especially in the heavyweight division, because, let's be honest, 70% of the fighters in the heavyweight division kind of employ a Justin Tafa-esque style. You know what I mean? We defend takedowns, we strike for power, because everybody at heavyweight has that natural knockout ability, so it sort of just naturally gives you a better chance of winning your fights. That's how I feel with Tafa. I always feel like unless you are fighting his exact fight, you're going to have a very good chance to beat him. And it'll be very interesting as Harry Hunsucker, because that kind of is the point. We talked about this with Don'Tale Mayes earlier on in the card. He might not be as skilled as his opponent, but they're probably going to fight at what his strength is. That's kind of how I see this fight against Harry Hunsucker. Is Hunsucker the more skilled guy in the clinch? I think he is. Is he more able to get the takedown? I think he is. And for these reasons only. Tafa, I think, has a very specific punching power range. We kind of saw that in the Carlos Felipe fight. When they were very close, Tafa didn't have this big power because he wasn't able to put everything behind his shots. He really does need sort of an extension and a setup into a lot of his shots, and that's why I'm so surprised about the odds and where they're at leading into this fight.
So let's talk about those, and then we'll go backwards just a little bit. So Tafa open a -325 favorite. He's a -340 or thereabouts. For Hunsucker, open a +275. He's +259 or thereabouts. So for Hunsucker coming into the UFC, it's not often that we get UFC heavyweights that have fought on the regional scene in Kentucky fighting the Tony Parkers of the world, you know, just throwing up one-handed layups or passing it out to the perimeter to Manu.
2007 Finals MVP. Show some respect.
Yeah, no, but he beat him by Americana. Tony Parker was 15-7 at the time. That was 2 years ago for Hunsucker. Hunsucker, he fights Jordan Mitchell after that, who's 9-14. He loses to Jared Vanderaa over on Contender Series, gets finished, and then he beats Corey Moon, gets knocked out, or gets the knockout there. Then he gets the fight against Tai Tuivasa 3 weeks later and gets knocked out in 49 seconds. My critiques to Harry Hunsucker. I thought he was almost going to finish Jared Vanderaa in that fight, and then he just kind of punched himself out a little bit. But when I look at it for Hunsucker, he's the type of guy to press forward, get the takedown, get on top, rain blows, finish the fight. Two contrasting styles. Hunsucker will leave himself open to where Tafa can definitely capitalize on the shots, and that's what I think makes a big difference in this fight.
I couldn't agree more with the breakdown, and that's so interesting about Justin Tafa, because when he is doing what he's very good at, he's phenomenal at it. But this is, again, these are my issues with just sort of this fight in general. Tafa, other than the big winging overhands, doesn't really have that plan B in his striking even. Like, think about Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa can set up his big power punches with the leg kick. He can use the elbow. He can get on the inside. with Tafa, he has some of those weapons, but he's not dedicated enough to those weapons to really open them up. And that's what is very interesting with him against Hunsucker, because Hunsucker's going to be the one crashing forward a lot, which is going to give Tafa the big opportunity to land the shot. But again, with the odds, if you're giving Tafa, let's say, 10 opportunities to get the knockout in this fight, because let's say that's how many times Hunsucker's coming forward, like, he really only needs that one shot. But if things go wrong for Tafa and he does get taken down even that one time, I really do worry about his ability to get back up to his feet at the UFC level.
I mean, Hunsucker and his durability, it's a question mark. Out of his 11 pro fights, 4 losses, 4 of them by knockout. And for Tafa, again, you kind of mentioned it, the Tuivasa fight for Hunsucker, that's really the thing. You got to play the mind game of, okay, what's he going to do now? And what if I rush forward? But what if he comes forward at me like he did against Sakai? What if he gets me in the clinch? So on and so forth. With Tafa, I'm going to be more at distance. I'm going to strike more at distance. What's another heavyweight comparable that you could give me for Tafa?
Like, I don't want to say Mark Hunt, but almost to a degree. Like, this is the problem with
Give
Tafa.
me a non-Anzac fighter.
It's somewhat different. No, let me think. Can I say Rocky Martinez? Because honestly, I put them kind of in the same... Like, this is the honest truth. I don't think Justin Tafa and Harry Hunsucker are going to be top 15 heavyweights, because Yorgan De Castro isn't even in the UFC right now. They couldn't wait to get rid of him, and he has a knockout win over Tafa with his eyes closed. That really is a big point. Like, you had kind of brought it up early, so I felt the need to let the cat out of the bag, but Tafa lost at the thing he does the best at to a guy who wasn't looking at what he was doing. And I understand he was at home. I'm sure there's a lot of emotions that come with that. It was early on in the fight. I'm sure I'd be excited fighting in front of 70,000 people from my home country too. But that really does worry me. When you are a specialist who has been beat at your specialty, that always is a big red flag for me in MMA.
Somebody's going to win by finish in this fight. So I like the under 2.5 rounds, and it's probably somewhere lower than the favorite that Justin Tafa is right now. If under 2.5 rounds is better than minus 340, maybe you want to go with that. Or you heed my warnings, because these are unranked heavyweights and anything can happen. And for that reason, I like the underdog in Harry Hunsucker. I think he's going to take the fight to the mat early, and I think you're going to see Hunsucker get the win in this fight. He's fought a not great level of competition to be in the UFC. It was a surprise signing based on the way that Vandera fight went. I don't necessarily see a big future. Like, I don't see these guys fighting Cyril Gane. I don't see these guys fighting Marcin Tybura. I don't see these guys fighting Shamil Abdurakhimov tomorrow. However, I do have Hunsucker in this fight. Power's the big equalizer. Justin Tafa has it. And again, wouldn't necessarily be surprised if Australia gets a big win there. You go to 5-3. But for me, I'm going to take the big underdog here.
I'm going to feel dirty if I tie, like, if we get a co-MVP.
That's not how this works. No. You pick.
No. I just said, I'm going to feel dirty if I get a co-MVP this year, because Justin Tafa is the reason I get one pick ahead of you. This is what I'll have to say. I do worry about Hunsucker's ability to take a shot, because it is very concerning. But the same thing does have to be said. My pick is Tafa, but the hesitations I have about Hunsucker's durability are just about as big as mine are for Tafa and his inability to get up off of his ground. Because again, if you go back and watch some of the tape about him before the UFC, he's fighting in like bars with 10 people in the crowd, and it's to people who have like one MMA fight and then they never fight again. He fought a guy who went 0-1 and only fought him, and he got taken down in the first round and got controlled. Like, I do worry about Justin Tafa and his long-term career in the UFC, but I think he'll get this win.
Matt, I'm going with the big underdog here. Harry Hunsucker, let's go! Let's Hunsuck it! Yikes. Matt, you've got the bad man, Justin Tafa. Let's see if it's Hunsucker time. Win one for Kentucky. Let's go. We got a big-time heavyweight fight in our main event. Of course, Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus. You're not going to want to miss that. And the rest of the fights on this card, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Absolute banger of a fight. Coming up this weekend, we have Josh Barnett's guy. We have La Mangusta, Victor Henry, coming in here on short notice, replacing Trevin Jones, taking on Raoni Barcelos. Matt, when I look at this fight, it reminds me of one of my favorite songs right now. It's called The Payback by James Brown. And at the start of the song, I'm not going to do a James Brown impression, but it goes, hey, gotta pay back. Revenge. I'm mad! Gotta get back! And you know why? Because for Raoni Barcelos, you look at the tape, this guy hadn't lost in 7 years and 9 fights. And listen, Sean O'Malley thinks it's the thing du jour to go, I'm the, what is it?
The
unranked champ. Well, that's cool, and that's cute. I have two Brazilians that were unranked champs forever. Leonardo Santos at 155 before his last two fights, and Raoni Barcelos before he took on Timur Valiev. And if you want to get crazy about that fight, Raoni knocked down Timur twice in the second round. That's a 10-8, and he would have had a draw, but it's a majority decision because one judge scored at 28-28, and the other two scored at 29-28 for Valiev. And that was the trouble. Barcelos kind of gave away the first round. In the second round, he goes ham. And then in the third round, Raoni didn't have the steam left. So for me, it was very disappointing, I guess, when you look at that fight. Because Raoni, again, another favorite, another big opportunity, another one where who wants to fight him? When you are the uncrowned champ of the unranked fighters, nobody wants to fight you. Raoni's one of those guys. Now, for him, Trevin Jones wanted that fight. Victor Henry ultimately gets it. And the craziest part about this, these guys are 3 days apart in birthdays. How crazy is that?
It really is insane. Like, when we put on our graphics, this is their UFC debut, this is their MMA debut, this is their birthday. This caught me very much off guard because, Raoni was always that fighter who I said if he was only 3 years younger, if we had 3 more years of his prime, then maybe he finally could reach those heights that maybe we set for him, or maybe the ones that he rightfully achieved on his own, because Barcelos is, like you said, he was that unranked king.
He was supposed to fight, again, before that fight that he had his last time out to lose. He was supposed to fight Merab, he was supposed to fight Rafael Sunsao, who's also on this card, and he was supposed to fight Marcelo Rojo. But going into that last booking with Rojo, Barcelos got COVID, then it was delayed, and then he had the fight against Valiev. I just wonder, at the age, with the COVID, I just wonder if there are any lasting effects based on the cardio in that fight.
I do worry a little bit, but we do famously say, like, every single one of these videos that you can't really, like, say much about it. That's true. This is my issues with Raoni Barcelos, and then these are all the reasons why I'm definitely going to pick him this weekend.
I got a page of notes on Victor Henry.
Perfect. With Raoni, he almost had like the Jourdain, formerly known as Calderwood, now Wood, happen to him, where he was promised this ranked opportunity all these times. He ends up not getting the ranked opponent, and then he lost, similar to Jennifer Maia, when she took on Calderwood. Calderwood was promised the title shot, thought, no, I'll get there anyways, I'll stay busy in the meantime, and ended up coming short. Now, this is a very, very important fight, because like you would set it up, it's revenge time for Raoni Barcelos. Like, this is when you either go out there and you destroy Victor Henry in the first 2 minutes because you are that borderline top 15 guy fighting a guy on a week's notice, or we do start to see the cracks in your game. We do see a 34 going on 35-year-old at bantamweight who, like you mentioned, is coming off COVID. There are a lot of question marks around Raoni Barcelos.
COVID before the Valiev fight.
Exactly. But what I do like about Barcelos is that he has a very unique game for this division. He's got phenomenal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I could talk about that for ages, but he's got great striking to back it up. He's one of those unique fighters, though, who, if his wrestling was 10% better, he probably would be in the top 15 already, because if he had that one transition to, okay, maybe you're a little bit better than me at striking, fine, that's no big deal, my jiu-jitsu will win out. Or if there were other guys, I guess I can't really name many, who have the jiu-jitsu credibility of a guy like Barcelos, but you get the idea. If his wrestling was just a little bit better, then I think he already would have had that opportunity. And that's why this fight's going to be so interesting against who, like you said, Josh Barnett's guy, Victor Henry, finally getting this opportunity.
Well, this is the craziest part about it. So you always hear about Machida Karate, you hear about Lyoto training in California, he's got Shinzo, but at the same time he trains at King's MMA, and I could go on and on about Rafael Cordero and everybody else that trains at King's. But then there's another gym. There's CMMA, California Mixed Martial Arts and Fitness, and that's where Victor Henry trains. He's a coach, and he's also the team captain. Now, we've heard of coaches and team captains. Daniel Cormier is probably the most popular of them, but that's where Victor Henry trains with. And you know who's one of the #1 guys that he trains with, and the reason I make the Machida connection? He trains with Weber Almeida, the prospect that you should definitely be paying attention to over with Bellator, because Weber Almeida is a wicked striker, and he has a great ground game of his own. He is the next Machida if Goto Yamauchi wasn't for me. But I look at this fight where Victor Henry's a guy that competes with Quintet, and I have a lot of different examples of that. But this is a guy that's well-traveled in not a way that most people from California travel, because he's competed extensively in Japan. He's had plenty of fights with Pancrase, with Deep, also with Ryzen, and you look at the fights over there. I mean, he fights, who is it? The Anzac fighter in Trent Girdham, finishes him in the 3rd round. Trent's a striker. Still a good way to draw that fight out, win it that way. Fights Masanori Kanehara, a guy who has a win over Alex Caceres in the UFC. What does he do in that fight? Did you watch that fight?
I did.
First round, gets taken down, gets pretty well dominated. Now, it was a little bit like Poirier in the guard in the first bit, and then at the end, Kanehara gets the back, and listen, it goes from round to round, but I went, oh boy. For this jiu-jitsu player in Victor Henry, a guy, he's superb at jiu-jitsu. Like, both of these guys actually match up very, very well together with Barcelos and Henry. There's little intangibles that make differences, but for style, this makes for a great fight. And if you look at that Kanehara fight, okay, he gives up the positions, then he gets his back taken. Second round comes out, he goes right cross, knockdown, finishes the fight, and then just lets out a yelp. So
he has a very short memory, and that's a great thing to have in MMA. They tell you that in sports your whole life growing up. Have a short memory. If something bad happened, just forget about it. Move on from that. That's a great thing that Victor Henry has been able to show.
Last fight out, wins the LXF Bantamweight Championship over Albert Morales. Well, he was in the UFC. Pretty good there. He also lost to Patchy Mix and Bellator, but Albert Morales has that pedigree of fights that you want, and that fight was a brawl. He has 2 fights against Denis Lavrentiev over with Paris FC as well as RCC. 1 win, 1 loss, both by decision. But Matt, the fights that made a lot of sense to me. He has a knockout win over Anderson Dos Santos before Dos Santos went to the UFC. Before that,
we talked about a lot for having a padded record, but
beat Kyler Phillips by split decision after Kyler was off of his fight from not Contender Series, The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, still, by split, that means something. And then Yuki Matoyo was another one of those ones that I looked at and went, he has had an impact on MMA. So I look at it. He beats Kanehara in MMA. He loses to him over with Quintet. But I absolutely love everything that I've seen. The evolution in his game, the little tricks that he's been able to bring in. And I think he's one of those veterans that you're not just going to see for 1 fight, 2 fight. I think you're going to see 4 or 5 from Victor Henry in the UFC.
I've got bad news, though. He's making his UFC debut on, 5 days notice against Raoni Barcelos? 6 days?
It's not a lot of days.
It's not a lot of days. And this is my problem. Even if I think you would have a very good shot with a full training camp, you don't have a full training camp, and that's the issue. Raoni Barcelos truly is the 16th ranked bantamweight, or he was at least for a short little period of time. And I do believe that he's going to get back on track. I think the guy who fought his last fight was maybe not, I don't want to say over-aggressive or over-emotional, but you could tell that he thinks he belongs in the top 15, and I think he sees this as a great opportunity to sort of reintroduce himself to the average MMA fan. And you mentioned this, but it has to be said again. You can't really look at this as like a prospect coming in. Henry not only is it a prospect, but he's only 3 days younger and he's had more pro fights. So I don't look at him being the much fresher guy who hasn't taken a lot of damage because, again, and I'm glad you brought it up, Henry will make fights closer than they probably should be at some points throughout his fights, and that does worry me. He will get into brawls sometimes and then shoot for the takedown. He will take some ground and pound and then try to escape. There's always sort of a process in one of his matchups where he's the one taking damage, and I do not like that being one of your skills when you're fighting a guy like Barcelos.
If Barcelos tries to take this one down to the mat, nope. And I like Raoni on the ground. I do not like him on the ground against Victor Henry, man. You watch the way this guy's able to transition, sweep out of bad positions. He is one of those guys. So I look at the odds, minus 285 at open for Barcelos. Only a few different sites that had this because his fight was just announced. He's now minus 310 favored or thereabouts. For Victor Henry, open to plus 225. He's a plus 251. Tapology votes, I doubt there's many of them. I'm going to set the over-under at 85% with Raoni Barcelos here.
I'll say slightly under, but they'll be close. I'm 0 for 4.
686 total votes. 91% Barcelos, 72% by decision for the 9% that have Henry, 43% by decision, 27% by knockout, 20% by submission. I didn't do the math to see if that was 100%, but that's what they have there. I think Victor Henry has a decent shot in this fight, especially if it touches the mat. I think on short notice, it does not favor him in this one. And when I started this one off with the payback lyrics, I think Raoni's going to go out there mad, and he's going to win this fight.
I think he's going to win by stoppage. I really do. Like, we've seen this sometimes where you have guys come in, and yeah, they might look really good. But I always bring up the Daniel Rodriguez example. He fought, who, Preston Parsons?
Yeah.
And what happened in that fight? It looked like he didn't belong there. It's just, on short notice, it's a very, very tough ask for you to fight an experienced fighter who's had multiple fights at the highest level in front of the world stage. I just think it's going to be a tough ask for Victor Henry.
I think it's going to a decision, and I don't know if I see Victor Henry getting finished. Considering 26 pro fights, he's never lost by finish, but Raoni when he's mad. Yikes, you gotta watch out for
And
that
he's got
guy.
legit power on the feet, too. Like, Raoni, we talk about his jiu-jitsu a lot and his scrambles, but he's a legit striker, too. He's one of the few guys, like, Oliveira, I think, is probably the best example in at least modern MMA for a guy who has world-class jiu-jitsu and who I would argue now has world-class striking, too. I don't think Barcelos is at that level of his striking, but he's a very good example of someone who's been able to bridge the gap between their jiu-jitsu game and their striking game.
Good kicks from Victor Henry as well. All of the levels, nice high tie stance. Right hand dips a little bit. Watch out for the right hand dipping. Both of us going with Brazil's Raoni to win the fight. The uncrowned, unranked champion to get it and get back in the win column. But if you can make a strong argument for Victor Henry, I want to hear from you because I'm absolutely ecstatic that he's in the UFC. And I feel like as long as his video has been, I could go on for days about his style. But absolutely love this fight and the rest of them on this card, including our main event, Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus. You're not going to want to miss this. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. There's times in the UFC when bookings make no sense. There's times in the UFC when they advertise the red corner as the guy that's lost 2 fights in a row compared to the blue corner where the guy's lost, well, no, he's won 2 fights in a row. We have a hodgepodge of a fight coming up this weekend between Dustin Stoltzfus taking on Gerald Meerschaert, GM3, a guy who is always the underdog in every single fight. Oh wait, not an underdog in this fight, and we'll talk about that as we go along. But the reason why I say this fight is weird is because for Meerschaert, he was supposed to welcome Abzupian Magomedov to the octagon. Now, why do I find that weird? Well, why would you have a debuting fighter fighting a guy who finished Bartosz Fabinski and Makhmud Muradov his last 2 times out there? That's why. I don't know why they made that fight. But for Dustin Stoltzfus, he's thrown around a couple times. He's supposed to take on Fluffy Hernandez. He's supposed to take on Ciao Borralho. And now he gets his fight against Gerald Meerschaert. Now, listen, styles make fights. And for Stoltzfus, maybe a fight against Anthony Hernandez is somewhat similar to a fight against Meerschaert. I don't know. But when I look at this one, and I look at exactly what these 2 guys can do, for Dustin Stoltzfus, does he have that style that before he came into the UFC, I would go, man, you can beat Gerald Meerschaert? 100% he did. You know why?
I was gonna say, I'm not gonna lie, one of your more poor hot takes.
But no, but really, okay, don't watch Dustin Stoltzfus fights in the UFC and go back and watch the, 14 other ones. I'll paint the picture for you. You don't even have to. Great leg kicks. To the calf, to the knee, to the thigh. And I said this was a leg kick episode. Great leg kicks. But his best attribute, he can switch stances and throw lead hooks like they're going out of style. Now, Manel Kopp, a little bit like that. Dustin Stoltzfus at 185 has that kind of power with that lead hook, with that ability to switch and pop around. Oh, by the way, lights out ground game. What win did he get to get into the UFC, Matt? Oh, I'm going to answer my own question like a dingus. A twister at 185 pounds. That stuff doesn't happen, right?
And never.
Never. So, for Dustin Stoltzfus, looks like an amazing fighter. Fights Kyle Daukaus, a wet blanket. Then his last time out, fights Adolfo Vieira. Now, this is the interesting part about that. Adolfo was exposed by Anthony Hernandez's fight before. The guy's cardio is terrible. He can have a good first round, but if he doesn't submit you, he's no longer the black belt hunter. He's the white belt giver. And listen, in that fight, what does Adolfo do? Paces himself and submits him in the 3rd round.
I think we should talk less about guys having good and bad cardio, and we should talk more about what fights are they comfortable pacing themselves in, because I do think that's a great point. Adolfo did not fight at his own pace against Fluffy Hernandez, and that's why he lost. Chiasson is very famous for saying this. When you find yourself in a fight harder than you thought it was going to be, it makes it way worse. When a fight, you think you're going to walk in there, I'm the black belt hunter. This guy only can submit like borderline black belts, if that. It's going to be very easy for me. Adolfo never thought he would be in the situations he got in that fight, whereas against Dustin, he was the aggressor in the whole entire fight, and he was really able to decide when and where and at what pace that fight was going to be dictated at. So I think that's a great point. This is a very interesting fight because Gerald Meerschaert's one of these guys who really relies on his opponent getting tired and then him slowly inching his way towards the win. It's not all going to rush together all at once. He's never going to go out there, drop you with a big shot in the first round, take your back, choke you out Damian Maia style, and we all look at Gerald Meerschaert and think, wow, what a beautiful performance by GM3. No, they get ugly. He eats a shot to give a shot. And hey, does it always work out? No, he fought Thiago Santos and got knocked out in the 2nd round, and that was a very, very hard fight to watch. But if you look at his last performance, where he was a massive underdog against Makhmud Muradov, not that he put the narrative to sleep that he has a bit of a poor chin, but he was able to eat some bombs from, I would argue, one of the most terrifying I don't even want to say punchers in this division, punchers in the UFC. And he was able to eat those big shots and do the classic Gerald Meerschaert fight. Oh, you're starting to get tired. I can push my pace a little bit more. And he just slowly takes you over and over and over again. But my big point about this fight is that I think Gerald Meerschaert is probably the better fighter than Dustin Stoltzfus in this fight, but I don't know if he's going to be able to weaponize his pace in a similar manner because I agree with you. I think Dustin could probably keep that karate stance, be very elusive on the feet, and just kind of pitter-patter his way, and you're not going to like the comp, but I think he could Elias Theodorou his way to a win.
That's the crazy thing. I mean, I look at this one and I focus on Meerschaert's wins. Okay, Darren win. What does he do?
He cracked him.
He wrestles, you can get submitted, you can get hit, and then I go back, okay, Oscar Piatto, well, Oscar, he bangs, and he gets tired, and he gives up bad positions on the ground, he got submitted in that one. It's really tough when you look at Gerald Meerschaert, and listen, we have a video on our second channel, 15-minute card breaks, where we are elated, and I'm going to spoil the party for you, to get a Gerald Meerschaert striking signatures card. How crazy was that?
It was great, because this is the thing. When you get to this point in MMA where you're watching every single weekend, every fight, and you're watching tape and all that, you don't really like fighters. You just respect them for who they are. And Gerald Meerschaert's the type of fighter you can respect because he's got that, like, farmer type of a style. Like, I pick up my lunch pail, I go to work, and I leave.
Farmers that bring lunch pails to the barn. When I look at this one, I'm going to give more credit where it's due, Matt, for Gerald Meerschaert. He is tied 5th all-time in middleweight finishes at 8, with Jacare Souza, Uriah Hall, and Thiago Santos.
Oh my goodness.
He is number 1 with the most middleweight submissions of all time with 7. And listen, at number 2, you have Damian Maia. Now, he spent some time at middleweight and at welterweight, so that's why. He is also tied for 7th all-time period in submission wins with the likes of Gunnar Nelson, Glover Teixeira, Ronnie Yahya, Joe Lozon, Cole Miller, and Kenny Florian.
Wow.
Gerald Meerschaert is one of the greatest submission specialists in UFC history.
It's like when you hear Buddy Hield has like the number 2 best 3-pointers ever based on like percentage and just the amount he shoots. It's wild, but it does kind of put things into perspective. You know what you're going to get in a Gerald Meerschaert fight. He's going to slowly plot forward, put together okay volume, nothing wild, but he is active throughout a fight. There's not long periods of inactivity. I just don't know if he's going to be able to cut off the cage in this fight. This is going to be one of those frustrating Misha Serkinov, Krzysztof Jotko type matchups. Because do I think Misha, in this case, Gerald Meerschaert, is the more talented fighter? Yes. But do I think that the elusiveness might be able to put Stoltzfus or Jotko over the edge? I do. I don't look at Dustin using his striking all that offensively in this matchup. Because this might be wild to say. If he does start to use a lot of his striking, I could see Meerschaert at least early on being a little bit behind with the speed, but as the fight progresses, I can see Meerschaert striking his way at least into a bit of a rhythm. So I'm very curious to see how Stoltzfus has a game plan for this fight. If he's the one going for the offensive takedowns, if he's the one happy to be on the back foot, it'll be very interesting to see the first minute of this fight.
Gerald Meerschaert turns 34 on Saturday. Happy early birthday to Gerald Meerschaert. He also just earned his first stripe on his black belt from Matt. Did you see who it was?
I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Rafael Lovato Jr. He's got hair now. I wish he was competing more. The former Bellator middleweight champion with a win over Gegard Mousasi. When you look at the odds for this one, well, listen, Matt. I mean, if you look at it for Gerald Meerschaert, like I said, he was perennial underdog for the majority of his fights. He is now a minus 227 favorite for Dustin Stoltzfus. He's a plus 184 underdog. If we look at the Topology votes, again, guys on a 2-fight win streak, both of them by finish. For Stoltzfus, he lost his first 2 into the UFC. I'm setting the over-under at 75% Meerschaert.
I think they'll be a little bit under.
Look at that. 773 total votes. 92% Meerschaert, 78% by submission. For the 8% that have Stoltzfus, 45% by decision, 36% by knockout. Matt, GM3 can get hit on the way in, and I think Stoltzfus has the power to put him out. But Gerald Meerschaert's one of those shifty guys. He's a coach over at Rufus Sport, training guys like, and I want to make sure I get it right, Ren Hiramoto and Bilal Muhammad for his fight coming up.
Makhmud Muradov hit Gerald Meerschaert with solid overhand rights. Do you think Dustin Stoltzfus can genuinely knock out Meerschaert?
But with power and the pitter-patter of Elias Theodorou, you never know.
I understand. It's just, I don't think Meerschaert's getting knocked out by Stoltzfus. That's the one guarantee I would give. I think he's more likely of being submitted, honestly. Because with Meerschaert, he tenses up, and that's why he gets hit early in fights, and that's why he can lose by knockout. I don't think he has a bad chin. I just think he has to settle himself into a fight, and I think that's going to be the key to this. I think Dustin's going to use his volume quite a bit, at least early on, and really work those leg kicks. But this is going to be the key to the fight. If the leg kicks take effect on Meerschaert, it's going to slow him down. It's not going to make him the cardio king that we know him as. But if they don't do anything to Meerschaert, and if he's able to just continue to walk forward over and over and over again, it might be exhausting walking forwards. You ever ran a down and back backwards? It's way worse.
Like you?
Yeah. You never had a basketball coach make you do that? Anyways.
Of course not.
For Dustin, moving backwards is very exhausting, to say that a lot in MMA, so I do worry about his cardio, especially when it comes to the third round. And really, I worry about most people's cardio when they're fighting Gerald Meerschaert. The pick's going to be Meerschaert, though. I do see him at least being the more steady guy throughout this fight. I think he's going to be able to keep a steady pace, like I've said 17 times now, throughout 15 minutes. And I don't think Stoltzfus can submit Meerschaert. And if it does come to the grappling, I think Meerschaert is at least defensively sound enough to make it boring on the mat.
I've got the brand new first stripe to the black belt, Gerald Meerschaert, in this fight. Again, I sold you a bill of goods on Dustin Stoltzfus. If you want to go back and watch that video breaking it down before his fight against Daukaus, listen, I talked him up because he had a lot of impressive performances against some good competition over in Europe, and he's one of those guys, he's trained over in Europe, he's fought quite a bit in Europe, he's a We Love MMA champion. You know that organization, Matt. So I look at it for Stoltzfus, he has a good shot in this fight, especially if you like him as around a plus 180, plus 200 underdog. For me, I like Meerschaert with those submission abilities, and I think if it touches the mat, it's his fight, but it's got to get grimy and ugly, and Meerschaert tends to get hit a lot in his fight, so we'll see what happens.
Like, could you imagine explaining Gerald Meerschaert to a friend of yours that doesn't know MMA? They're like, but wait, does he move well? Here's the thing.
Again, that's why I did this.
Is he a good stand-up fighter? He's not bad. But, like, his grappling is at that top level. Like, it is wild. You can't really put it into perspective in your head just how good of a grappler Meerschaert is until you do start reading off some of his accolades and some of the records that he is tied for. And hopefully at some point we can look back and just kind of respect the whole career of Gerald Meerschaert.
The greatest middleweight submission artist of all time, Gerald Meerschaert, both of us going with him to get the win in this fight. You let us know down below in the comment section if you got Meerschaert. If you have Stoltzfus, you let us know, especially about the fights coming up on the rest of this card. Wonder Boy's taking on the teammate of Meerschaert and Bilal Muhammad in the main event. You have Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus. You're not going to want to miss this. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. It's holiday season and you don't know what to get as a gift or a stocking stuffer. Well, today's sponsor, Manscaped, has the tools to guarantee you win this year's stocking stuffer or white elephant competition. Manscaped is a leader in men's below-the-waist grooming, and they have served more than 4 million men worldwide. And if my math is correct, that's almost 8 million balls. Get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com with code FNP. Ho, 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 fellas. Naughty or nice. 'Tis the season to perform. Now, Matt, listen, it has been a calendar year with Manscaped.
Yes.
We've been with them. We've enjoyed their products, so we can tell you quite a bit about them. And I'm going to get a little TMI right off the hop. And if you've never seen me do this, I'm going to reach around here in the shed travel bag because I was waiting until this show. I noticed it last night more than anything, sitting here, but the Weed Whacker. When you hear the little snap and whatnot
Snap,
inside of my nose, it is the Weed Whacker doing its thing because I have a nose hair problem. And I don't use this all the time. Yes, I use it for the ads on Monday. I usually go one nostril at the front. But the Weed Whacker is probably the product that I've used the most this year. And if you know somebody that has an ear or nose hair problem, pop that out. Or the Lawnmower 4.0. Pop the top off. Grease up the motor. Do whatever you need to do. There's so many great products that you can find with the Perfect Package 4.0. They've also recently released their 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, as well as their body wash. And the nice thing about it is you get the same idea of the scent from their refined cologne. So, I mean, I go through it. These are our picks for the Manscaped Surefire Win Stocking Stuffers. Now, overall, the 2-in-1 conditioner just launched. Kill two birds with one stone. I mentioned it earlier. The cologne-infused body wash. You take the cologne, refined cologne, you add it with the body wash, great stuff. The Shears 2.0 luxury 4-piece nail kit. The Crop Mops ball wipes for the stanky balls. The signature cologne that I mentioned. And listen, the formulations, they're all vegan, cruelty-free, dye-free, sulfate-free, paraben-free, so you know that the products are legit. And listen, make sure you hurry on over to their site. Enjoy these wild gifts and hopefully they show up before the holiday season. While you're at it, get 20% and free shipping at Manscaped with the code FNP. Whether this is for your partner, your dad, your brother, your friend, get them all something that they're actually going to use, and it's almost sure to get a laugh. Get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com with the code FNP. Be the ballsiest gift giver this season with Manscaped. Matt, I know my father-in-law, he had a laugh when he got the Manscaped Performance Package as a gift in the past year, and he absolutely loves it. And truth be told, and this is behind the scenes, there's a new member to the Fight Night Picks family. He's actually joined us tonight, and he's not here with us because he was just picked up, well, in another province. But all that to say, the last time my father-in-law was over, he left the shed travel bag at my house. My wife just brought it back down for him. He'll get a laugh when he gets that one back.
Nice.
Matt, what have you liked so far out of Manscaped in the past year?
I really like that all their smells do kind of fit in the same family. You know, you're not coming at people. You ever wear cologne, then you might put on hand sanitizer or something, and they just have very different smells. You don't really know which one's the more powerful one. Or you ever just have a deodorant that might not match your cologne? The good thing about all this Manscaped stuff with the body wash, the shampoo, and the cologne, even the ball deodorants, it's all very similar, so you don't feel like you're coming at people with 6, 7 different scents. It all is very nice. And I don't need to use the nose trimmer nearly as much as you do, but the fact that you haven't had to sharpen that thing about 5 times in the last year, with how much use you get out of it, has been quite surprising.
Well, check them out. Manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. Get 20% off on your order and the old free shipping. I absolutely love this card. The main card is popping. You're not going to want to miss any of it. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Absolute banger of a fight coming up this weekend. We have a possible fight of the night between a couple of guys who have been through the ringer to the top of the mountain, to the bottom of it, and back again, between Kevin Swanson and Darren Elkins. You might know Kevin, maybe not as Kevin Luke Swanson, but as Cub. Is it Cubber Lang? Is it the Killer? I don't care. Because for Cub Swanson, the guy's a walking performance bonus machine. And when I look at Cub Swanson and everything that he's done in his career, and I match it up to Darren Elkins, A, surprised this isn't a rematch. B, surprised that Darren Elkins doesn't actually have more bonuses than he does on his record. He has 3 performance bonuses, and that's it. That's it. Meerschaert, Bektic, and then his last 2 fights, you look at it, I mean, those were crazy. Luis Eduardo Garagori and Derrick Minner, but Minner here is a performance bonus and his win over Michael Johnson. Those are the 3 performance bonuses that he has. Because peppered in there, and listen, somewhere in my mind, it got locked away in a vault. I forgot that Darren Elkins was a decision fighter for years. It's kind of crazy, right?
It really is, but you have to go all the way back to like when he fought Dennis Bermudez, even before that, when he was on.
That guy was a banger.
He was, but Darren Elkins at one point almost got an interim title shot. Like, people don't remember this. I'm gonna tie this together. I vividly remember Cub Swanson right after the Artem Lobov fight. He said he was gonna take some time off. He was becoming a dad. He said, hey, there was a chance when Frankie Edgar fought for the title that they were going to get Cub Swanson to do it. He was on a win streak too. He was in the media a lot. He had just had a main event against Lobov, which doesn't really mean you were in title shot, but he also had that crazy fight of the year against Doo Ho Choi. It was hot boy summer for Cub Swanson back in 2017. Goodness, that was a while ago now. But I really remember this. Darren Elkins was also on a winning streak, and Cub Swanson was like, they almost gave Darren Elkins the title shot over me. Now, they ended up going with Frankie Edgar. It was sort of a weird situation, but still, how wild would that have been that Darren Elkins could have gotten a title shot instead of Cub Swanson just a few years ago? This is the wild thing about Cub Swanson. I remember getting on here and saying, hey, he had the ACL surgery. I'm really going to worry about what he's going to look like when he comes back. But he's proven to me that he really is the exact same fighter he was before he left. And I think that's something we have to say. When we brought up Matt Sayles and his knee injury before, about, oh, how's he going to look like when he came back? Matt Sayles was never the fighter that Cub Swanson was pre-knee injury.
Cub Swanson never had a knee injury and then weighed 250 pounds either and admitted to it.
Exactly. But that's the thing about Swanson. Yes, he was injured, but you have to remember where he was before he got injured. This isn't just like a bench player then getting hurt and falling out of the rotation completely. Cub Swanson was like a borderline all-star in the UFC. He's kind of in that category of, will he make the UFC Hall of Fame? Not unless like an individual fight gets him in, but he's in that hardcore Hall of Fame with Jim Miller, with Joe Lozon. Like, if you like MMA and if you've ever watched MMA, you probably have some great experiences watching Cub Swanson fight. I don't know what that has to do with this fight, but this is what I keep on going back to when I try to think about the X's and O's. If you can hit Darren Elkins once, you can hit Darren Elkins twice. He's made a career off guys who can't go further than that, though. If you can only hit him once and twice, then your cardio falls off a cliff. That's when Darren Elkins can bring himself back into a fight. With Swanson, I do worry about his susceptibility, especially of getting submitted at this stage of his career. It's just, they're going to talk about his black belt, but listen, it's a black belt, we'll say. He's been submitted enough. I worry about him on the mat, but I really do think that Swanson's steady gas tank and good punching power is enough to recreate what Ricardo Lamas did against Darren Elkins.
Cub Swanson has 10 Fight of the Night bonuses in the UFC and 2 performance bonuses. Crazy to think of it that way. And I mean, I look at this, yeah, for Darren Elkins from 2011 on, he had 9 wins by decision, 5 of them by finish. If you look at it from Alex Behunen's point of view over on Twitter, you know him, you love him, you see him out there. He does those humanizing athletes things. And I looked at it for Cub Swanson, his favorite knockout of all time in MMA is his knockout win over Daniel Pineda, who almost finished him in the first round and then fell off his own cardio cliff. And his favorite movie is a movie that has this quote. And this is, like, I didn't even write this one in the notes, but it's this. And you're going to know what movie it is. Those eggs were a lie, Steven.
Nacho Libre.
A lie! They give me no nutrients.
I like it.
Yeah, so his favorite movie is Nacho Libre. I love that movie. My wife hates it, but I think it's one of the best movies ever made. It's incredibly underrated. And so when I look at this fight, Nacho Libre aside, Cub Swanson, yeah, I look at his last 2 fights. He got Giga kicked to the body and finished. You hate to see that. It was Donald Cerrone-esque was the drop. And then he had the fight against Daniel Pineda where, again, we were critical of the knee injury being over. He was over 36 at the time, so it was worrisome. We went back and forth on it. We picked Pineda, and then obviously Swanson wins the fight. But he got beat in the first round. He comes back in the second round. You love that out of Cub Swanson. The fight before that, he went strike for strike against Kron Gracie. It was a great fight. It was a fight of the night. But in that one, it was really tight. For Darren Elkins, the last 2, he beats Derrick Minner, who, unfortunately for Minner, kind of had some poor fight IQ decisions his last time out here, just, last weekend. And he beats Luis Eduardo Garagori, a guy who, honest to goodness, I go, how good was he really? But in that fight, man, Darren Elkins looked great in every aspect of that fight.
He really did, but the problem is, I think of the 10 minutes we've talked about Garagori on this channel, about 9 of them have been very negative, and I'd say 1 have been complimentary. It's just weird to see Darren Elkins at this stage of his career, because he was near the top of the division. He was a borderline top 10, top 5 fighter at one point, and then he did fall on hard times. It's nice to see that
was Cub Swanson. He lost 4 in a row. He fought Frank Edgar years ago.
I'm going to get to it with both guys.
All right.
The difference, though, is that Darren Elkins does feel more weathered to me at this stage of his career, and I do worry about Elkins' ability to eat a big shot from a power puncher. Now, I know the flip side, Cub Swanson got TKO in the first round in his last fight against Giga Chikadze, quite possibly the best Muay Thai fighter in the division, and a guy who's striking might only be second to Max Holloway in the division, and maybe Yair's better than him. But like those would be it's a very short list of guys who might be a better striker than Giga Chikadze. I just don't know how Darren Elkins is going to look at the striking range in this fight, because normally he's able to just sort of volume his way into a takedown attempt. It is quite sloppy what he does do on the feet, but when he knows he can get it to the ground, he can just... Because he is a bit of a finisher, but this is the truth. He will positionally dominate his way to a good position and then try to rain down that ground and pound. I think if he was a bit more of a submission threat, that would be a better chance for Elkins to win. But when he's going to create that separation of rain his own ground and pound blows, that's going to be Swanson's ability to scramble and actually get off the bottom. What I don't like out of Swanson is his ability to grapple for long periods of time, but when he is given those abilities, just sort of make that one quick move, try to explode, and force a scramble, that is where he does shine, especially in the grappling. So I think there's an area for Darren Elkins to win. Again, we wouldn't have this as a fight of the night if we thought it was going to be one-way traffic, but I do like Cub Swanson in this matchup.
Swanson opened a minus 155 favorite. He's a minus 210 or thereabouts. If you look at the flip side for Darren Elkins, open a plus 135. He's a plus 170 at this point. Over under on Tapology votes. Surprise to us, there to you. I'm going to set it at, I'll give you a chance here. I'm going to say 60% Cub Swanson.
They better be over.
All right, there you go. 909 total votes, 75% for Cub Swanson, 76% by decision. For the 25% that have Elkins, 58% decision, 20% submission, 15% by knockout. Those don't add up at all, but I'm reading them correctly, I assure you. Matt, in this fight, Cub Swanson's got bad takedown defense, and Darren Elkins likes to take guys down over and over and over again.
You are right, but Darren Elkins showed in the Ricardo Lamas fight that he just can't take damage all that well if you are able to put it on him in a volume type of way. Now, can Elkins eat that one big shot like he did against Volkanovski, sort of get his way back into the fight with some of the wrestling exchanges just to clear the cobwebs and then get back into the striking? I think he can. But when you look even back to the Meerschaert fight, I know he won that fight. It's the greatest comeback of all time, but still, listen to me for the first 2.5 minutes. He's eating a lot of sustained damage, and even in the Lamas fight, in the first round, he gets hurt quite a bit, even though he has a couple good areas. In the second round, he gets hurt even more. And then in the third round, the ref's just kind of forced to stop it due to a combination of the scar tissue on his face getting cut up and the fact that he is getting hit quite a bit. I just worry about Elkins against power punchers in the feet. I know against Michael Johnson, he was able to look good, but that was Johnson later on in his career in a weight class he didn't really belong at. I'm going to pick Killer Cub Swanson, but I do think this is going to be a great fight.
Swanson at a 2-1, and I'm right on the fence, so I'm kind of close to Elkins. I've got Swanson for the volume ability, and again, he's the type of guy, we mix in punches, elbows, things in close against Elkins. Now you worry about the takedown even more, but I do like Swanson in those exchanges and in this fight. So both of us going with Cub Swanson here, but if you can make a strong case for either guy, we are listening to you with open ears. So let us know down below in that comment section. We get some great fights coming up on the rest of this card. Diego Ferreira is taking on Mateusz Gamrot in the main event. Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Absolute banger. Coming up this weekend at lightweight, we have Poland's former KSW champ. He is the gamer, Mateusz Gamrot, and he's taking on a man who dropped Carlos from his first name. We got him. It's Diego Ferreira. And if you wanted the king and the unranked champion, well, listen, I mean, I hate to go with a Brazilian vibe, but Leonardo Santos until he got finished in, well, his last 2 fights. Or you could go with a mixture of different fighters. I mean, we talked about it earlier on this card in Raoni Barcelos. But, Matt, for Diego Ferreira, he was that guy, and he was kind of one of those unranked champs. Now, how did his first fight against Beneil Dariush go? Well, he lost that fight. Then he lost to Dustin Poirier by finish. But then after that, he beats Olivier Aubin-Mercier, Jared Gordon, Kyle Nelson, Rustam Khabilov, who just everybody thought he was unbeatable for the longest time.
He fought Benson Henderson in a UFC main event.
And Meerschaert Taisumov and beat him. And listen, Meerschaert was another one of those uncrowned champs. Legs built out of tree trunks and stone and whatever else you want to throw in there. Beat him in that fight. Looked amazing at UFC 242 because Meerschaert, believe it or not, was like this giant enigma. Nobody wanted to fight Taisumov, especially not in Abu Dhabi. And listen, Diego Ferreira takes the fight, passes that with flying carpets, as Ricky would say. And then against Anthony Pettis at UFC 246, he goes out there and submits him. So all of a sudden, the man himself, Diego Ferreira, is way up here with the fans. The guy is later in his career, but listen, age is but a number for this guy. Fights Beneil Dariush and loses by split decision. Hey, Beneil's going to fight Islam Makhachev in a possible title eliminator in his next fight.
That was a great fight, though. I actually kind of forgot how good Diego Ferreira versus Beneil Dariush was, but upon multiple, I'm not at like the Luke Thomas 49 times, but that really was a great fight.
So he goes out there and he loses that fight by split decision. And then he fights Gregor Gillespie. He's a slight underdog. It was a really good fight. It actually won fight of the night. And it's only 2 rounds. In the first round, Gregor Gillespie, what's he known for? Wrestling and fishing. There's only 2 things. And in that fight, Diego controlled the first round. He looked absolutely amazing. Strikes were there. Everything was there. Now, the one telling thing, and it's on our screen right here, and if you can't see the asterisk, it is there, because Diego weighed 160.5 pounds, and you got Gregor Gillespie at 156. Now, did Diego Ferreira get a little bit of the Fight Night Picks curse with an interview with JHK on this channel before that fight? Yes, he did. But he missed weight, and it paid in that second round because the high pace, the weight, just everything all together, it fell apart, and he fell off a friggin' cliff in the second round of that fight.
I hate to phrase it in this way, but I really think it's the only way I can. Honestly, good for him, because, and I say it this way, if he makes weight this week, and if he is 100%, we know what fighter he can be. And that's why that Gregor Gillespie performance was so disappointing. Because he got tired, he faded, and then he got out-grappled. If you look back at the Meerschaert Taisumov fight, which was really his introduction to at least the somewhat elite of the lightweight division, His cardio was what won him that fight. He outlasted Meerschaert. He put the volume on him, and I understand it wasn't with the grappling, but still, when you see a guy outpace his opponents and use that as a way to win, you can assume he's going to do that for the rest of his career, and to see the fight get taken from him in that way, it was very disappointing.
I mean, realistically, it was like that old Demi Lovato song, Cool for the Summer, because, I mean, you don't want to tell your mother that guy's fighting that hot and heavy in the heat of Abu Dhabi, so that was amazing.
It really was. They kept on flashing up that stat where it's like it's 120 degrees inside the arena. That wouldn't be fun to compete at whatsoever. But this is what I will say about Diego Ferreira. He's a better grappler in the first round, I do believe, than Mateusz Gamrot. I actually do think, hear me out, if he can get in the top position, we've seen what he's been able to do against other high-level grapplers. He is not somebody you want to get stuck underneath of. But there's a reason I've been mentioning him in the top position. He is one of those unique grapplers who, yes, you don't really want to go to the mat with him. That's sort of the last resort when you're fighting a guy like Diego Ferreira. But off of his back, he's not nearly as dangerous as he is when he's in top position. I'm going to use the Jacare Souza comparison, and people might not like this, but it is true. Look at Jacare when he fought Jack Hermansson. I know Hermansson's a pretty good grappler, but like, Hermansson was able to be in top control, he was able to pressure and really ground and pound and dominate Jacare quite a bit when he was in that top position. I kind of look at Diego's top game and just his overall jiu-jitsu being very similar to where, yes, if he gets on top of Gamrot, if he can trip him, if he can drop him, then he will have great success, especially on the mat. But when you look at Gamrot and really his unorthodox wrestling and just his wrestling game as a whole, I don't know if Ferreira is going to get that opportunity, and I really only think Diego's chance of getting this to the ground, if it's going to be his decision, is if he's able to drop Gamrot early on.
If you look at Mateusz Gamrot, and the reason I look down, I want to make sure I'm right. If you go into Fangraphs, you're a big baseball fan, you look at prospects or even top players, you got your little ratings and your values out of 60. If you look at Mateusz Gamrot, and I go with, listen, this is where I'm tying it into baseball. I threw it out there last week, and I said, oh, so-and-so is a five-tool player, like Mike Trout. And there are five-tool players in all sorts of different types of sports. I mean, look at, this is a poor one, Bo Jackson. In every single sport he wanted to play. But no, look at certain players. I mean, LeBron James, can he do it just about everywhere? Sure. Is he the best three-point shooter? Maybe not, but he's pretty darn good at it. So for Mateusz Gamrot in the striking, if I'm rating it out of 60, I'd say he's a 40, maybe a 45. In his grappling, and okay, let's break it down. In his wrestling, okay, he's probably a 55. I would say. In his jiu-jitsu, he's probably a 50 to a 55. His defensive striking, he's probably a 45 to a 50. Like, I'm saying this, these numbers are really high. That's how good Mateusz Gamrot is. You don't get to 19-1 coming through the KSW organization into the UFC by just fighting scrubs that nobody's ever heard of. Boris Mankowski, how many times did he fight him, Matt? A couple of different times. How many times did he fight Norman Park?
That's what I mean. Half his record is just those two fighters.
No, that's it. But you look at it, and you look at the record here. I mean, I'm going, like, you can talk about a lot of different fighters. Now, I say Boris Mankowski. How many times did he fight him? Well, he had a grappling bout with him, but they're actually buddies. And if you look at it at American Top Team, I say fight. If you're going to have him in around your corner and in at the gym, you're going to be going at it. Did they fight as pros? No. But Norman Park, many times. He beat Kleber Quique Herbs to... I freaking wish that guy fought more, because he's such a fun fighter to watch. Marian Zielkowski, I mean, we can go through this record and not poke holes, but point to the reason why this guy's such a good fighter, and then to look at his last two fights. Beating Hot Sauce the way that he did Scott Holtzman, but beating Jeremy Stevens in the first round by Kimura, like... Mateusz Gamrot with his ankle picks and everything else he can do. This guy's a special fighter.
He is a special fighter, but I think we have to temper our expectations just slightly, and I want to say it for these reasons. Against Guram, he did get dropped a couple of times when he fought a superior striker. I understand, but even against Scott Holtzman, like, Holtzman was able to hit him with some good power shots in the feet. Like, he was at least able to get from point A to point B. That's the only part of Gamrot's game that I don't think is on the level of everything else that you laid out. I worry about his defensive striking because he doesn't roll with shots at all. If you hit him, he feels the 100% force of your strike. And I know that these are things that we normally look at when we're talking about unranked fighters, but he's 19-1, and he is a champion of a major organization outside the UFC. So I don't look at Gamrot like I do look at a normal unranked fighter. I'm just saying, I think he's going to start fighting guys with numbers next to their names if he is able to win this weekend. And I think that there are a few holes in his game when he starts to fight those upper echelon guys. Like, if he fought Justin Gaethje, do I really think he'd be all that comfortable striking with him at range? I don't think so at all. It's just, the one hole I would say Gamrot has in his game is that He's taken a lot of damage throughout his career.
Look at the park fights.
Even in KSW, he kind of has that Justin Gaethje-ism in him where he's better than his opponent, but for the crowd, he can make it seem a little bit closer just because he is that kind of fighter. Gamrot has taken a lot of damage in his young career, and I do worry about that. I doubt he'd ever fight Poirier, but just a matchup. Like, when he fights those more heavy-handed guys in this division, it's something to watch out for, but I gotta be honest, stylistically, I really like this fight for him because I think he can follow a very similar blueprint to what Ferreira's last two opponents have been able to do. Beneil Dariush, did he win every grappling exchange? No, but he did prove that if you take down Diego, you can have success. Same thing with Gregor Gillespie. If you're on the bottom, yes, there's a lot of trouble, but if you can control him from that top position, it makes your life a lot easier, and that's kind of what Gamrot's game's built around.
On the day of the fight, Mateusz Gamrot will be 31 and a week. So happy belated birthday to Mateusz Gamrot. And for Diego Ferreira, well, in a month, he turns 37. So happy early birthday to him. If we look at the odds for this one, you have the favorite as Poland's Gamrot, minus 190 at open, roughly still there right now. If you look at it for CDF at a plus 155 or thereabouts. Topology vote, surprise to us there to you. I'm going to say 70% Gamrot over under.
I'll say they're slightly above.
Look at that. 864 total votes, 89% Gamrot, 46% by decision, 40% by knockout for the 11% that have Ferreira. 66% by decision, Matt. In this one, I struggle with this, and I did in the Leonardo Santos fight against Clay Guida, going with my guys, going against my guys, people that I followed for a very long time because breaking the fourth wall. These have both been my guys for a long time. Yeah. I absolutely love their fight styles. I get excited to see them fight. So when I saw this fight matched up, you know there was a twinkle in my eye. So when I look at this one, I like Gamrot based on youth being in his favor, and Carlos Diego Ferreira doesn't strike like Norman Park does, nor like Guram Kutateladze. So I don't see a brawl out of these two guys. I think it's going to be finesse on the ground and working some of those transitions. And I like Gamrot being the wilier guy in those exchanges.
I agree 100%. And I could honestly see Gamrot getting a TKO on the feet just because Diego really needs to set up his strikes and throw in combination. He's a very unique striker in that way where he will throw the 1-2, go with the head kick, kind of reset for his next combination. You said that a lot in the Tyson fight just because that fight was primarily contested on the feet. I could see Gamrot timing one of those kicks and hitting him with a straight shot on the in-between, but I do agree with your breakdown. I think if Gamrot can get on top, really implement his top pressure, make Ferreira feel your top pressure though, because if you just go in there trying to lay on top of him, maybe burning this round, his cardio won't be as bad as you think it is. Whereas if you put a pace on him, really make him work out of bad positions, he will be a lesser fighter as the fight goes on. And I don't see that being the case for Gamrot.
Big time fight coming up this weekend. Will it be a return to form for Carlos Diego Ferreira, better known as Diego Ferreira these days, or will Poland's Gamrot get the win with a third in a row? Matt, both of us going with Gamrot to get the win in this fight. You let us know down below who you have. And man, we get some big fights coming up on the rest of this card. Wonderboy taking on Bilal Muhammad in the co-main. In the main event, you have Derrick Lewis taking on the man himself, Chris Daukaus. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.
Rafael Assunção is 39 years old on a 3-fight losing streak, and he's taking on a guy who's 10 years younger than him on a 3-fight win streak. We have Brazil's Assunção taking on the Pacific Northwest's own Ricky Simón, and he has a lot to build on because not only does he have 3 wins in a row, but his cousin Vince Morales just picked up another giant win just a couple of weeks ago. He knocked out Louis Smolka.
Did he ever?
What an amazing win. And listen, for Simón, this is a guy who I thought I had him all figured out. He was a guy that I was so excited about coming into the UFC because it was around when Fight Night Picks started, 2018. And Simón, he was an LFA champ. He's coming in. What can he do? Pressure guys up against the cage. Rinse and repeat takedowns. Ground and pound specialist. I love Ricky Simón's game. But it got him in trouble. And when he faced guys that were better than him in certain areas, he ended up losing. If you look at the 5-on-in, lost to Uriah Faber by knockout, which is the worst. That's worse than losing to Rob Font by decision because Uriah Faber was coming back and he was old and he wasn't supposed to win. And Ricky Simón got dropped and finished. Like, that's not supposed to happen. So major damage control. Then he loses to Rob Font. He picks himself back up. He beats Ray Borg by split decision. That was a wild fight. There was a lot of back and forth. Takedowns, up, down, takedown, up, down. Ray Borg, obviously not a true bantamweight, but he had such hard time making weight at 125. Simón was a much bigger fighter. And then he takes on Gaetano Pirello on short notice. And listen, I sold you a bill of goods on Gaetano coming into the UFC for that Simone fight. That was the Wednesday card that they had in January.
I gotta feel good about this, Craig. I did say Simone's gonna destroy this guy.
Yeah, and poor Gaetano got taken down and finished fairly easily. So for Ricky Simone, we get the true test his last time out. He fights Brian Kelleher. And Brian, the book's out there, he's like Nick Lentz, but smaller. And that's really what Brian Kelleher does. He's a good striker. He crashes forward. He can take you down. He can dominate you on the ground. And if things go south, well, he does have that choke that he can always go for. So there's so many things that Kelleher does well. But what I loved in that fight was that Ricky Simone didn't have any problems in some of those in-betweens. And he proved to me that he's a much better striker than we had ever seen before. He looked good in that fight.
I just think he's a much more confident striker. I think it was always within Ricky Simone, but it almost took time for it to catch up to his wrestling and then for him to feel comfortable enough to really show that in the cage. But I agree, against Kelleher, he was using his boxing and his striking in an intelligent way. He wasn't going all in with it. He was kind of cognizant of, hey, against a guy like Kelleher, I could eat that one big shot, end up guillotined in the first 30 seconds, and that happens when you fight Brian Kelleher. This is what I will say about Simone and his last opponent that I really liked setting him up for this fight. It was one of those weird instances where you fought somebody who, oddly enough, is like a lesser version than the guy you're about to fight. Because I agree with everything you said about Kelleher. He's got good wrestling, he's got great boxing, he's got underrated power on the feet, and when push comes to shove, he's got submissions, albeit his are much more defensive. When you just want to break down sort of the bare bones game of Rafael Assunção, there's a lot of similarities there. He's somebody who can go out there and get the offensive takedown. I would say Assunção is quite a bit more advanced with his own jiu-jitsu game, just with his own offensive jiu-jitsu. He's much more, I'll go from your guard to your half guard, whereas Kelleher will just sort of try to use his own ground and pound to open you up. This is the thing about Assunção that people forget. He was the third-ranked bantamweight for about 7 years, and he never got his title opportunity.
He was supposed to fight TJ Dillashaw like 3 years ago, and it didn't happen.
Well, okay, they fought twice already, so he loses, or he beats Dillashaw back in like 2013, then he loses to him at UFC 200, and then they've never had the trilogy. It's always sort of been rumored out there. And he's gone on this losing streak ever since. Now, I understand the fight that started this losing streak was supposed to be his sort of title opportunity. And if he beat Marlon Moraes back then, he probably would have got the title shot. But that fight went about as poorly as a main event slot can. He gets dropped early, gets submitted. And ever since, it's been a weird run. Because I gotta be honest, I don't think that Assunção is a fighter who age has really affected him all that much. I still think we're seeing a very similar guy now than to what we saw at 36, 35. I just think he zagged every time he should have zigged. And I know that's hard to say about a fighter, but even look at Cody Garbrandt. Like, Cody Garbrandt might not even be in the UFC anymore, and Rafael Assunção got flatlined by him. And why did he get flatlined by him?
He chased him.
No. He had his back up against the cage, or he was forward. Garbrandt faked that one shot, and Assunção zigged when he should have zagged on the other one, and got hit by the other shot. Got knocked out. It was a brutal loss. It just... When you look at Assunção, I still feel like a lot of the good is still there. I know he's on a 3-fight losing streak, but I look at him a little bit differently than I normally would look at a fighter who's 39 years old on a 3-fight losing streak. I think he's kind of like Jussier Formiga in that if he gets cut, it's kind of going to be a shame for the UFC because he's got more left to give. But I think this is a very, very fun fight and an interesting one because if Assunção wins, what does this do to Simone? He's had a few cracks in the top 15. This is sort of... I don't want to say this is his last big opportunity, but you get the idea. You can't think that Simone's going to keep on getting these big-name opponents fight after fight after fight.
If you lose this fight and you're Ricky Simone, you're a 15 to 25 guy for the rest of your UFC career if they decide to keep you around. If you beat Assunção, you're a top 15 guy as long as they'll have you because this division is incredibly logjammed and it's hard to stick around at 145. That's the crazy thing. 135, because again, Simone's last fight was at 45, a one-off against Kelleher. But you look at it 135, Kyler Phillips is knocking on the door. Sean O'Malley, whether the UFC likes it or not, is knocking on the door. And oh, by the way, there's the Song Yadongs of the world. There's so many different fighters that are right there. Marlon Vera, they're all right there.
Hot take, I think Song Yadong is as good as Sean O'Malley.
That's crazy. Not crazy to think, but it's crazy to think. There's so many fighters right there. And right now, Ricky Simone is one of those guys. Now, today he could be 14. Tomorrow he could be 9. And then the next day he could be 19. Like, that's just the spot that we're at with this loaded bantamweight division. So I look at this fight and I look at the odds and I consider everything. And if you look at it for the man who's making the comeback, the get back, to get back into the win column, you look at it for Rafael Assunção, over on Best Fight Odds, open to plus 180. He's a plus 222. You look at it for Ricky Simone, open to minus 210. He's a minus 277. Ricky Simone, I would say, moderate to heavy favorite. Tapology vote, surprise test there to you. I'm going to set the over-under. I'm going to make this weird. I'm going to say 76.3%.
I thought it would be 60-40 Simone Assunção.
All right. There we go. 937 total votes, 81% Simone, 84% by decision. For the 19% that have Assunção, 68% have him to win by decision. Now, Bill that's holding the cards behind us has to do a better job for you to see these Tapology votes that we have behind closed doors that we lie to everybody about when we're on the show. No, I'm kidding. Matt's just been bad at guessing today. So when I look at this fight, Matt, yeah, it really is tricky. Is Simone the leveled up Assunção? I don't know about that. I really don't.
Simone should win this fight, but I fear he won't for these reasons. He needs the takedown, but he has to be really smart with it. And Assunção is one of those guys who, unless you have legit finishing ability, he's going to be there for the total 15 minutes. Even go back to his fight against Sandhagen. I know Sandhagen beat him, but that was a very competitive fight for as long as it lasted. And the thing about Assunção, he's not a finisher. He kind of has one of those dominant cruise records where you look at it, a lot of decision wins. But I look at the Rob Font fight that he had, his last win before he went on the losing streak. He was a man on fire in that matchup. He drops Font on the feet. He's feigning takedowns. He shows the fighter that he can be when he is at his best. I just wonder if that same fighter is still in there after 3 losses. This is very much a boxing mindset, but like, you almost learn to be okay with losing at a certain point, and just at 39 years old, does Rafael Assunção want to try to get back into the title picture? Does he think, okay, if I beat Simone, then I'll fight Sean O'Malley next week, because that's probably fun, and then start to fight some of those contenders? I think Assunção is at the part of his career where we're probably just going to get the same version. I want to pick Assunção because he is so big of an underdog, but I'm not. I think Ricky Simone's wrestling is going to be too big of a factor in this fight. And for as little as I like Simone striking against the elite at this division, because trust me, I don't think he can outstrike a lot of guys in the top 15 at bantamweight, I think he'll be able to get it done against Assunção for this reason. Assunção's cardio is the one thing that isn't really what he used to be. He's not someone who will push the craziest pace on you. He'll stay consistent, don't get me wrong. It's not like he falls off a cliff. But he's not somebody who's going to be able to really work out of the bad positions Simone gives to him. And I think Simone will be able to win one of those 29-28 decisions where it might be a little bit controversial on the night of the fight, but if he can get this win, it'll do big things for his career.
Rafael Assunção is tied for second all-time with bantamweight wins in the UFC at 11. But when I look at it, he also is number 1 overall with 8 decision wins in this division. He's also, number 1 for the longest win streak in this division's history with 7. And I could go on and on and on about Rafael Assunção and even Raoni Yaya in this division. The point that I want to make, Matt, about this fight as I scroll down this page, it's more about Ricky Simone than it is about Rafael Assunção. Because for Ricky Simone, this guy is an absolute takedown machine. Is he as good as Montel Jackson? Well, maybe not, but Ricky Simone is second all time.
I think he's a better wrestler.
And takedowns landed in this division's history. Number 1, Merab Dvalishvili. And I'm not saying like active fighters. That's all time. Merab has 50. Simone has 33. Bellator's Brett Johns has 29. But Ricky Simone, on average, attempts 6.93 takedowns per 15 minutes. That's insane. I think that, coupled with the boxing and the gains that we've seen, plus a speed advantage of a 10-year age gap, will prove out for Ricky Simone. Would I be surprised?
I was just saying, you understand though why I'm so hesitant to pick him,
yeah,
right?
Would I be surprised the next day if I opened my eyes and Assunção won this weekend? No. So I'm going to stay back, watch this fight with a pop and popcorn mindset, but I do have Ricky Simone in this fight. Matt's in agreement on this one. We can't wait for this fight because we're going to learn a lot. Does Ricky Simone have an effect against older fighters where they win and he does not? We'll find that out this weekend. We'll also find that out as Chris Daukaus gets the main event slot against a guy who's had 9 of them. Well, this will be his 9th. And Derrick Lewis. Can't wait for it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.
Big time fight coming up this weekend at strawweight. We have Amanda Lemos. That's the nickname over on Tapology, but not necessarily on the UFC site. Taking on Overkill Angela Hill. And listen, for Amanda Lemos to be this late in her career at 34, to be not necessarily weathered because of long periods of inactivity, it's been insane. Because she shares something in common with Angela Hill. Both of these women have had to reinvent themselves throughout their careers. For Angela Hill, it was losing in her first stint in the UFC, going back to Invicta, winning, and then ending back up in the UFC, where all of a sudden, You're almost a walking highlight reel. She's become a star. I mean, she has a great Instagram game. She's been featured on the UFC panels in the past.
Multiple main events.
She's had multiple main events. And the other thing for Angela Hill, in a couple of weeks, she has, well, in about 3 weeks. No, it really isn't about 2-3 weeks. She'll be celebrating her 37th birthday. So we up here at Fight Night Picks in Canada, we're going to have a Timbit for you, Matt. I have a 20 pick. I'm going to pop out a Timbit. We're going to talk about this fight and have a little bit of fun. We're not sponsored. I'm going to have a chocolate glaze. Would you like one?
I prefer the regular honey ones, but yeah.
Those ones are gross. But, Matt, when I focus on this fight, Angela Hill, very volume-centric. I said something once upon a time that was considered as blasphemy by MMA fans, and the fact that I said that Angela Hill was going to out-Muay Thai Loma Lookboonmee.
Because she didn't.
People said I was crazy, but listen, she did a great job in that fight, and it was a wonderful win for her. But if you look at the 5-on-in, a win over Loma Lookboonmee, a loss to Claudia Gadelha by split decision, that was a really close fight. That's one of those ones where Craig always picks the opposite in the split.
One was just as close, though.
Very close. Loses split to Michelle Watterson, same deal. Beats Ashley Yoder, and then her last time out, loses to Tisha Torres, another fighter in this division who's had to reinvent themselves. But for Amanda, the crazy thing is the reinvention. She loses to Leslie Smith 4 years and 4 months ago. She went in there, we reference him all the time, Julian Lane type of fight, let me bang, bro. But the craziest thing is, that fight was a bantamweight.
Like, no one's gonna... Some of you might not know who Leslie Smith is, to be completely honest, because it has been a little while since she was a UFC fighter. But I brought this comparison up earlier. She's kind of like Brandon Jennings, where, like, she wasn't an all-star level fighter. She wasn't really in main events, although she did fight Chris Cyborg. But if you were lucky enough to be there to witness her fight, it was something special. And even now over in Bellator, like, if you see Leslie Smith is going to fight, check it out. She's got great volume, a very aggressive style.
Good elbows.
Great elbows. And the Lemos fight really showed you, okay, what the best version of Smith was. But it did sort of lay the groundwork for how special Lemos could be if she ever did find her weight division. And I do think Lemos, I always reference Jessica Ai when I say this, I think she did find her weight class. Because remember Jessica Ai, she was, and this is me being nice, she was not a very good bantamweight. I think that's fair to say. She was on a lengthy losing streak, makes the move down to 125, and listen, no matter what you think of Jessica Ai, she's definitely been a better fighter down at this weight class because, hey, now I'm fighting people who are more my size. I'm not constantly punching up in my weight. And for Lemos, it was okay. I have great power, I've got great knockout ability, but I'm fighting people bigger than me, so it's not going to get the chance to really showcase as it would when I'm fighting people my own size. Amanda Lemos at 125 pounds is one of these, at 115 pounds, is one of the scariest, I would say, pound-for-pound strikers in the UFC.
So she takes over 2 years away, almost 2.5 years, then fights Miranda Granger. From 135 to 115, in this move, it's been insane. So she beats Granger by submission, she beats Mizuki Inoue, in a bit of a weird fight, and I gotta say this, Mizuki Inoue is one of those fighters like Kevin Lee. Everything's there, and I hear about everything. I just haven't seen it in the UFC. And so for Mizuki...
So wait, is it now Mizuki Inoue future champ?
One day, maybe. She beats Lavinia Souza, the Brazilian Gangsta. Now, that's before Brazilian Gangsta, the allure, was totally gone after the Randa Marcos fight. In that fight, she stole her soul. She walked her down, and she knocked her done.
Had no respect for Souza's striking whatsoever.
Knocked her done. That's going to be a new Fight Night Picks thing. We're going to put it on shirts, and it's going to look weird. And then her last time out, she fights Montserrat Conejo, and that fight wasn't even close.
It was a bit of an early stoppage, to be completely fair, but you could tell where the fight was going. I do think that has to be said. Like, Montserrat was very upset with the stoppage. It wasn't the worst one I've ever seen, but it does show you what Lemos, or what kind of power she has.
So here's the thing. Do you fall all the way in love with Lemos' power? Do you love the volume striking and the well-roundedness of Angela Hill? And by the way, here's the craziest thing. You might be thinking about this. You might be watching the beautiful graphics that pop up that are put together by the team. Well, the two of us. When you look at this, I would have thought Angela Hill, she's got to be 6 inches taller in this matchup. She's actually listed as the shorter fighter. I found that incredibly amazing.
It's just because you have a bantamweight moving down to strawweight, where normally Angela Hill is the bigger fighter in her weight division, and that's why I do favor Lemos so much this week and sort of cat out of the bag. I know often when you have someone who's a -3, -400 favorite, we like to say, oh, well, the odds should probably be a lot closer. But this is my big issue with this fight, because I do agree with a lot of what you said. Angela Hill is an extremely skilled fighter who's had very close fights with some of the best fighters in this division. But she always stands at the exact same range from her opponent, and it's at that kickboxing range where she does have a bit of an open stance. I understand she'll go to the clinch every now and then, but that's a lot after her opponent engages. And my issue in this fight is that if you're standing there with your lead leg right out there, Lemos is going to chop that off. And she's a fighter who will. She has synergy with her strikes. Lemos will start at your leg, then go to your body, and then take out your head. She has that sort of striking IQ that you look for when you're not just talking about how great of a striker they are, they can actually set things up. And that's why I do think Lemos is kind of deservingly so such a big favorite.
I mean, you look at this one, Angela Hill's never lost by knockout in her career, and you look at the odds for this one, Lemos coming in minus 260 favorite. She's now a minus 392 over on Best Fight Odds, the average on Monday night. For Angela Hill, open to plus 220. She's plus 299. If we look over on Topology, 855 total votes, 87% Lemos, 67% by decision for the 13% that have Hill, 81% by decision. I gotta say this. I don't know about the odds. I mean, I think the hype's there for Lemos. It's just, I don't think she's going to knock out Angela Hill. And with Hill's volume, I have some reservations about taking Lemos, especially around a minus 400 favorite. I think it's silly.
I just don't think Hill's going to get the chance to really set anything up in this fight. I truly don't, because she is so heavily reliant on her volume to win fights. And we've seen Lemos. If you don't have power, she doesn't respect what's coming back her way, and she will walk through whatever you're throwing your way just so she can land her own power shots. So for Hill, I don't know what Hill can do to get Lemos off of her and just her aggressiveness off her. So maybe you don't think Lemos can win by knockout. I still think Lemos is going to be the aggressive one landing power shots. And even if Hill is able to get some volume off, it's going to keep her in the pocket, which is by far the most dangerous place for her. So I really do like Lemos in the overall progression of her game. I think if she can stay dedicated to the leg kick early, it's going to take away some of that volume from Angela Hill, and it'll set up the big power shots later. I know Hill looked good, oddly enough, against Jessica Andrade, who has big power in this division, and Hill even dropped Andrade. Highly recommend going back and watching that fight. It happened like 6 years ago. So we have seen her in there with heavy-handed power strikers. I just think this is a little bit different. I think Lemos does have that fighting IQ to where she's going to feel what Hill's throwing her way, have no respect for it, and try to march her down.
I have Amanda Lemos, but I am on the fence. When it comes to a minus 400 favorite, that's not where you want to be. So for me, pop and popcorn, you're a goofball if you're putting Amanda Lemos on a parlay.
Oh yeah, don't bet on it, but I still feel quite comfortable that she will win.
Yeah, this is for the picks and it's for the trophy. So Matt, I absolutely am intrigued by this fight, especially where it stands in this division, both of us with the Brazilian Lemos here, and I can't wait for our other two fights. Wonder Boy taking on Bilal Muhammad, and in the main event, you have Derrick Lewis and Chris Daukaus. You're not going to want to miss this. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.
Big time co-main event coming up this weekend. And listen, we were excited. UFC 269, you were supposed to get Leon Edwards and Jorge Masvidal. But to close out the end of this year, this is the biggest welterweight fight we could get. We have Wonder Boy, you know him as Stephen Thompson, taking on, remember the name, Bilal Muhammad. And for Bilal Muhammad, if you want a win for both of these guys that predicts the way that this fight could go, I mean, do you remember the time Bilal Muhammad fought the striker in Diego Lima and beat his head in against the cage?
Wait, no, you just made history, Craig. You're the first person to ever compare Diego Lima and Wonderboy Thompson.
Bilal Muhammad absolutely looked like a man possessed in that fight. And here's the thing about the bully, B, if you will. The crazy thing is, you look at the losses that he has in the UFC and you go, okay, he loses to Alan Jourdain. Kind of awkward because they're on the UFC
Fight
panel.
of the night.
But that was an amazing fight. He gets finished at UFC 205, the big New York City card, to Vicente Luque. Then he rings off some more wins. So let's talk about some of the wins. He beats Randy Brown, he beats Jordan Meehan, he beats Tim Means, he beats Chance Rencounter, and then he loses to Jeff Neal. But does that loss really hold a lot of water?
I'll let you continue.
It does. However, I'm going to move forward and make my point. He beats Curtis Millender. He beats Takashi Sato. He beats Lyman Good. He beats Diego Lima. He has a no contest against Leon Edwards where he got his head boxed in. And then he comes back and he fights Demian Maia, one of the greatest grapplers of all time. And in that fight, he nullifies his game and Bilal Muhammad gets the win. So, he is a winning machine in the UFC. Albeit, most of the fights aren't maybe the best. However, like you said, he has a fight of the night. He had a great fight against Diego Lima. I really enjoyed it.
He stopped Takashi Sato. A lot of people forget that.
That was very, very fun. So for Muhammad, he has had some good fights. And if you want to pick another fight against a good striker but a well-rounded guy, it was his win against Lyman Good. Now, listen, Lyman had just lost his father, the COVID thing, so on and so forth. But for Muhammad, a big-time win. And listen, for Wonder Boy, he had a bit of a deviation to the mean in his last time out because The last time he had gotten taken down was against Tyron Woodley in 2017. Woodley got one, and that was it for both the fights against Woodley. So impressive stuff for Wonderboy. That's been his career arc. This guy is so hard to take down. He figures out space so quickly with his karate that you stand no chance. And you look at it, so few losses on his record. But when he took on Gilbert Burns, and I know you have a counter to it, but when he took on Gilbert Burns, statistically speaking, he was taken down 3 times. And in that fight, it definitely didn't go Wonderboy's way.
It didn't, and Gilbert Burns did a really good job at just nullifying what Wonderboy is really good at, and that's distance striking. And Gilbert's one of those unique fighters because I know we've been talking a lot about just how much his striking game has improved, but in that, he at least fought in an intelligent way. Now, this is why stats in MMA don't matter and they don't mean a thing. It's like when Usman fought Covington and people are still arguing about if it was or was not a takedown. It's all very subjective as to what is and is not in significant strikes, in striking defense, and even takedowns earned. And against Gilbert Burns, yeah, Wonderboy got taken down, but he was never controlled on the ground, and that really is the key. Was he held up against the cage? Was he put in awkward situations? Yes, he was, but he was never downright controlled on the mat, and that's the important thing going into a fight with a guy like Belal Muhammad, because Muhammad, oddly enough, fights in a similar manner to Gilbert Burns. They're very, very different, but they both want to set up their boxing. Burns is much more kick heavy, use their takedowns, and then win the fight on the ground. My issue with Muhammad is I'd say he probably has better cardio than Gilbert as to where he's more steady than Burns. He can just sort of keep steady output for a total of 15 or 25 minutes. This is what I worry about with Muhammad, though. You brought up all of his losses. Don't all those guys kind of fight in the exact same way? And don't all those guys kind of fight like Wonderboy? Alan Jourdain, a long, rangy Muay Thai striker who can defend takedowns, beat you up on the feet. Vicente Luque, more of a Muay Thai kickboxer, but still, his whole game is built around defending your takedowns and being a rangy striker on the feet.
Or submitting you.
Jeff Neal did the exact same thing to Belal Muhammad, and Leon Edwards was on his way to doing that to Muhammad before he ended up poking him in the eye. It's just, with Belal Muhammad, he is a great fighter, but we have seen a certain style of fighter be able to beat him. Guys with big power on the feet who can defend his takedown and just force him to become a striker. Because if you want to look back at the Diego Lima fight, and I think that's a great one to look at when you're trying to project this fight, his striking has gotten better, but the issue is that he doesn't have big power on the feet, so if you are somebody who can move their feet really, really well and get him to chase you, then you're going to be able to counter yourself. Even look back at the Luque fight, and I know that was a long time ago. It was a long time ago for both guys. Luque waits in the pocket with his hands out, strikes in an intelligent manner, and the second Muhammad drops his hands, Luque counters him with possibly the nicest left hook you're ever going to see. It puts Muhammad down. Muhammad got dropped against Alan Jourdain twice. He got dropped against Jeff Neal twice. Like, he's been hurt by these big, rangy strikers who can hit you from a distance and get out of the pocket, and I don't see how this fight goes any differently, because Wonderboy is that exact fighter to a T.
The trouble that I have with this one, and I'll give Belal Muhammad his props if I haven't already with that Diego Lima fight. You want to go back and have fun? That's a great fight, especially if you're a big Belal Muhammad fan.
Because he showed us something we hadn't seen before that, and it was like a very technical and very high-level striking game.
Yeah, and I mean, the fight against Takashi, in that one, takes him down, has a lot of success. Like, if anything, Takashi Sato is a very well-rounded striker and a good guy on the ground,
But would you say he's on the level of the Jeff Neals and the Leon Edwards and the Wonder Boys?
That's where my point is here. That's the trouble. I mean, Curtis Millender, Takashi Sato, Lyman Good, Diego Lima, Damian Maia at the end, UFC 263. I just have a hard time with kind of the level of competition, some of the wins. I mean, if you have a no contest against Leon Edwards where there is no winner, and then you fight Damian Maia, you'd think you'd be fighting guys in that upper echelon. You fight Damian Maia, now you get Wonderboy. And for Wonderboy's last time out against Gilbert Burns, we've seen this. Wonderboy hasn't had a stretch like this in his career. He loses to Darren Till, however close it was, whatever you want to say. He gets finished by Pettis. That fight was almost 3 years ago. He beats Luque, beats Neal, and then he loses to Burns by decision. You have a bad taste out of some of these Wonderboy losses where maybe Belal Muhammad can capitalize. So you look at the odds for this one, and to probably nobody's surprise, Wonderboy's a favorite. Open to minus 250, minus 253 is what best fight odds have. Belal Muhammad, open to plus 210, he's a plus 202. If we have a look over on Topology, I'm going to guess that the voters have 85%. I'm going to say 85% over under Wonderboy.
I was thinking 80 for Wonderboy, so look at that, Craig. You're right on.
924 total votes, 85% Wonderboy, 81% by decision. For the 15% that I'm Muhammad, 81% by decision. I swear to everybody out there, and Matt can back me up on this, even though we've been kind of joined at the hip for almost 3 years now with picks, that I did not look at these Tapology votes before I said what I said there. And for 2 of them, they've been on. That has no bearing to these picks. And this is one of those ones that I have a bit of a hard time with, but I'm going to use hindsight to say that Wonder Boy's going to win this one and strike from distance. I would be pleasantly surprised, though, if Bilal Muhammad goes out there and fights his fight, because I think that would make for a really fun one.
It would make for a fun one, but this is my problem. Like, Vicente Luque struck with Wonder Boy for the first round of their fight and kept it competitive. But even Luque, who I would say is one of the best strikers in this division, started to get his timing read by Wonder Boy. And Luque can put anybody out at any time, on the feet or on the ground. And Wonder Boy fought that fight perfectly. Yes, did he get hit by big shots? Of course he did. But when you're fighting a guy like Luque, that's going to happen. Muhammad doesn't have that kind of power to put Wonder Boy down, though. And that's what I keep on going back to.
Be sick if he did.
It really would be. But he has improved his striking. But one thing that you don't really have... it's really hard to say, I'm going to become a knockout puncher all of a sudden. Francis Ngannou can't wake up tomorrow and be like, okay, I'm a volume guy now. Like, some things are just sort of ingrained.
But he can go, I'm a wrestler now.
He can. Some things are just ingrained into your style. And for Bilal Muhammad, he's very good at volume striking his way to get close to his opponent and then shooting for the takedown. I just don't think he's going to be able to strike and get close to Wonder Boy. Now, I can hear you people already, you guys and girls, saying, hey, Gilbert Burns was able to get in on Wonder Boy's hips. Why can't Muhammad do the same thing? It's the speed in which they can get to your hips. It's very different. Gilbert Burns athletically is as athletic as any guy in this division, and the speed in which he can go from striking to a takedown attempt is almost unmatched in this division, whereas Bilal really does need his striking a little bit more to close that distance, and I just don't think he's ever going to get into that comfortable range to finally shoot a takedown.
Both of us going with Wonder Boy in this one, because could this fight be the parlay buster? I wouldn't want to find out. So for me, I'm going with Wonder Boy. Matt has him as well. But if you remember the name in this fight, man, I think that would be the cat's pajamas if he gets a win here. Because it would really shake up this division and make things interesting as far as a call out after the fight. Because Wonder Boy's not going to call anybody out. And if he does, it's going to be in the nicest way, or he saves it for his podcast. So Matt, both of us going with Wonder Boy Thompson in this fight. I cannot wait for the main event on this card. Derrick Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus. It should be a great one. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big time fight coming up this weekend. We have the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, making his 9th main event walk with the UFC and his 4th in a row, taking on the former Philly police officer. It is, of course, Chris Daukaus, and it seems like he's taken a little bit of a sabbatical. I think it was before his last fight to get fully entrenched in MMA. And when this guy is on, holy smokes, is he ever on? You look at his last 5 fights. CFFC over Danny Holmes, then Parker Porter, then Rodrigo Nascimento, Alexei Oleinik, Shamil Durkimov. All of these wins by knockout. This guy is a knockout machine. And I thought, and I was wrong, I thought Chris Daukaus, from the time he came into the UFC to his last fight where he weighed 231 pounds, I thought the move is imminent. He's going to make the move down to 205 pounds. Now he's taking on one of the biggest heavyweights in the UFC in Derrick Lewis. And you talk about power punching. This is such a treat for the fans, this main event.
This could be a phenomenal fight. And it's almost the perfect fight because you have the guy who's been around the top of the division for a long time. He's had some setbacks. He's had some big wins. But we don't really know where the career of Derrick Lewis is right now. And he's being matched up with, I'd argue, him and Tom Aspinall, one of the most exciting young prospects in the division, getting the biggest opportunity of his career. Like, I really do think these are the fights that people get excited for. Crossroads is a little overused, but you get the idea. This is a crossroads fight. If Daukaus wins this, then we're off. It's nothing but main events, title shots, stuff like that for the next 5-10 years.
Curtis Blades fights.
Unfortunately, probably that. And for Derrick Lewis, we don't really know. Like, if he loses this, you don't want to throw out the B word, Bellator, but we've seen him in there with a lot of those top-level guys in the UFC, so you don't really know where he is in his career. But I think this is such a fun fight, and for especially 2 of the reasons you had said. Derrick Lewis is as big of a heavyweight as you could possibly get, and for Chris Daukaus, he subscribes to a very different mindset. It's that speed does beat power, and that's why this fight's so much fun. We're finally going to see what is the best weight or size for the heavyweight division. Is it better to sort of be that smaller 230 to 240 up to 45 range, I'll say, so you're a little bit more mobile. You might not have the one-hitter quitter power, but you can put your skills together a little bit more, or is it better to just be that one big massive fighter who might be a little bit more limited with their skills, but then go in there and get that one-hitter quitter? That's what this fight is all about, and both guys have been susceptible to their opponent's strength in the past. I know you've talked about it a lot, Chris Daukaus' knockout losses, and he does have some bad ones on there, and even against Shamil Abdurakhimov, it's great to look at the highlight reel win when guys do win via highlight reel KOs, but you also kind of have to talk about how the fight got to that point. Daukaus did eat some pretty big shots against Shamil, and listen, Shamil's no world beater on the feet by any means, so it does worry you a little bit. If you look at the success Abdurakhimov had, at least early on in that fight, you can see how Derrick Lewis could be able to go out there and get, what, his 21st professional knockout win?
Well, the thing that scared me with Daukaus coming into the UFC, he was 2-2 to start his pro career. He got finished by Sean Teed by Americana. Now, they were supposed to run that back before Daukaus got his UFC call, and then he lost to Jourdain Hernandez Figueroa back in 2014 by knockout. He strings off some wins. He fights for the CFFC title at CFFC 73 back in 2019. Has a very strong first round, and then Zhu Anyanwu, who's in the UFC, who's in Bellator, finishes him, and it was a brutal knockout loss. So for Daukaus, he takes about 6 months off. He finishes Danny Holmes. Again, he's supposed to fight Sean Teed a couple of different times. And then he gets the call to fight Parker Porter. And I looked at that fight, and I was wrong, but I looked at that fight as, okay, Daukaus is a guy that can get it done with his length. He's got pop at the end of his shots, but he's a bit of a light heavyweight, you know, lighter heavyweight, and then realistically he goes in there and looks great against Parker Porter. He looks great against the submission artist of Rodrigo Nascimento, finishes him in 45 seconds. He fights Alexei Oleinik. Okay, Oleinek's a little long in the tooth, but you know, you're not going to finish him quick. Oh yeah, no, he finished him quick. And then he's booked against Shamil a couple of different times, fights him back in September, and finishes him in the second round, right cross, and then by ground and pound. So you love to see that out of him. For Derrick Lewis, again, you know exactly what it is. So what I want to do, Matt, I'm going to throw it on over to the community tab because I threw this out there about 12 hours ago. I said, full card video on the way Tuesday, but first we need to know who's taking the main event. And right now, out of 814 total votes, 53% with Derrick Lewis. And out of the commenters, not a lot this week. We got to hear from you. Come on. This is your part to be a part of the show. We're going to do our best to get to the comments actually below this video, but Akash Deep, he's rolling in the deep. He's out there every week saying, gonna be a wild fight, gonna have to ride with the Lewis. Think Doc is super skilled, though. Should be great. Tyler Ferreira, I don't know, Tyler, how you pronounce your last name, so you let me know. But the pressure is going to be really tough for Derrick. I like Daukaus in this, especially with the odds. We have Ishin saying Daukaus wins if he doesn't get caught. And then there's a couple of replies, well, that's every Lewis fight. And then Sneakers is saying Daukaus, you know, he's going to be able to get the win. So, Matt, when I look at this one, there's a lot of Daukaus support in the comments, albeit there's not a lot of comments. However, the votes have Lewis. Are you surprised by that?
I really am, because I don't think Chris Daukaus is really getting the respect he deserves with his grappling, because everybody's looking at this fight just assuming that Daukaus is going to go in there, throw some boxing combinations, and hey, if his speed wins out, maybe he drops Lewis early, and maybe he can win via ground and pound. We forget about how good Daukaus is on the mat, though, and I know he hasn't been able to fully express that in the cage yet, but it's not just the fact that he trains, or his brother is very good at jiu-jitsu. This is a guy who trains at Martinez BJJ primarily, and he is phenomenal on the mat too, to the point where I really do worry about Derrick Lewis and his defensive grappling. I'm not the only person in the world. I'm sure everybody who's ever broken down Derrick Lewis's career has worried that, because he has that just get up. And yeah, that's really, really good. But it's also really, really bad when you're fighting somebody who can take your back on those get-ups, who can try to be a little bit more dynamic than just kind of letting you get up to your feet. Because this is one of those fights where, is Daukaus the better wrestler? Definitely. Is he the better jiu-jitsu practitioner? Without a doubt in my mind. Is he faster on the feet, and does he have better hand speed? And possibly power per pound? Maybe he has all those things going for him, albeit the last one is very controversial. I still think he can get flatlined bad in this fight, and it's just because of the Derrick Lewis effect, where every fight Derrick Lewis has ever fought in, we talk about, hey, he's not as good of a wrestler. He has worse cardio than his opponent.
Oh, he's probably got better cardio than most of his opponents.
He does, but it's sneaky because he doesn't fight with a sustained output. He's someone who will just rely on that one big shot. And the one big shot can land in the first round, it can land in the 5th round. And I guess before I give my prediction, I'll hand it off to you. Do you think the championship rounds will matter in this fight, or will we get there in the first place? Because if it does, I don't know if it's going to be a massive advantage for Lewis, but I do know he's been there before.
Yeah, I mean, this is his 4th main event in a row. It's his 9th main event in the UFC. We happened to see him at one. You know, it was the first event we ever went to.
They rarely go the distance, though. That's why I'm asking if that 4th and 5th round will be important.
True enough, and I mean, for Daukaus, the same thing can be said. I mean, it's been a lot of first-round finishes. The fight against Zhu Anyanwu was back a couple of years ago. That was his last 5-round fight. So, main event experience, not necessarily... It's not there as much for Daukaus as it is for Lewis. And the same thing, again... Daukaus is one of those guys that can throw good volume, throw good power. He's reserved enough, and it's weird to say that where they end in the first round, but he picks his shots. He's got that Jeff Neal to him where he knows exactly when they need to be thrown. And Jeff Neal, I gotta say this.
Good job.
Whether you thought he won or Ponzinibbio won, it doesn't matter because Jeff Neal fought that Neal fight his last time out. He was reserved. He picked his shots. I love that fight out of Jeff Neal. Daukaus can do that, but he knows when to pour it on. So, again, it might sound a little odd for me to say that where they end in the first round, but I love to see that out of Daukaus knowing exactly when and where and how to place those shots. But against Lewis, you have to throw all that knowledge out of the kitchen sink.
You really do, and I hate saying this in the prediction where we pride ourselves on, you know, being educated on the subject, but like, with Derrick Lewis, numbers don't matter, who he's fighting doesn't matter, weight classes barely matter with Lewis. Like, he could probably knock out Brock Lesnar on one night and lose to Brandon Moreno the next by decision. That's how weird Derrick Lewis is with his MMA career. I really worry about Lewis if he ever is in a sustained grappling position with a guy like Chris Daukaus, because we saw
it against Oleinik.
I know, but it was almost like his size physically prevented him from getting in some of those positions. I know that's something to laugh at, but go and watch that fight. Oleinik has him in a choke, and Lewis just kind of sits in it because his arm's big enough to not pressure him.
But he's 30-some-odd pounds heavier.
I understand with all this, but think back about when he fought Derrick Lewis, or Daniel Cormier. DC took his back like it was nothing, though, and choked him out. I worry about Lewis's defense when he just gets up against guys who can take the back. Because again, when you're just getting up to your feet and you're not paying attention to the finer intricacies of grappling, those top-level grapplers are going to find a hole in it. And I know Oleinik wasn't able to, but Oleinik's 45 years old. Athletically, he's not the same guy he used to be. And I could see a world where, I know it's not the most likely of finishes, I'm not sure what the prop is, but I could see Chris Daukaus winning this fight by submission.
Chris Daukaus' significant strikes per minute.
Goodness.
And there's only 4 fights, so 5 gets you into the record book, so to speak. 9.03 given to 3.4 taken at a 53% striking accuracy clip and 64% defense. For Derrick Lewis, 2.49 given to 2.48 taken, 50% accuracy to 41% clip. Those numbers, level of competition, Derrick Lewis has fought the best of the best for the longest time. For Chris Daukaus, it's been a quick, slow burn, if you will. 1 year and 3 months ago, he's fighting Parker Porter. 2 months and 2 weeks ago, he's fighting Abdurakhimov. 2 months and 2 weeks doesn't get you ready for 5 rounds either. So I'm worried about this one for Daukaus. If it gets past the second round, that one favors Derrick Lewis off the bat. I think he has, again, that sneaky heavyweight cardio where he's reserved enough and he can work his power. You look at the odds for this one. Chris Daukaus, your 7th ranked heavyweight, is the favorite coming into this fight. Open a -160 is a -140. Derrick Lewis, your 3rd ranked heavyweight, open a +140 is a +116. Coming off a title fight, albeit interim, in his hometown against Cyril Gane.
Did he land a punch, though?
He did not have his best showing against Cyril Gane. I'll bring you the numbers just because, hey, we're in a position to do this. So for Derrick Lewis against Cyril Gane, the strikes, significant, 98-16, total strikes 112-16, favoring Gane in that fight. So again, it was not a good showing. He had a performance bonus against Curtis Blades. He's had fight of the night against Junior Dos Santos, performance against Volkov. I can go through the bonuses. You know the drill with Derrick Lewis. He is kill or be killed. The topology votes for this one, surprise us there to you, Matt. You've had a rough go with these.
Can I set them then?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think Lewis is going to be the favorite 60-40.
I'm going to say under. I'm going to say Daukaus. Look at that.
I was under, though. So, 964 total votes on Tapology, 54% Lewis, 89% by knockout. For the 46% that have Daukaus, 86% by knockout. The fans favoring a knockout. The fans at Fight Night Picks were 1 percentage point different. It was 54% Tapology, Lewis, 53% Fight Night Picks with Lewis. So, the fans ever so slightly have a Lewis, Matt. And we can talk about Lewis for some more. We've talked enough about this fight, I think. We have a big time card coming up this weekend. Let's get to the point. Who are you picking here?
Okay, Derrick Lewis can win any fight he's ever in just because of how he is and his knockout ability and his ability to carry his own power late. I think Daukaus is unique, though, with this ability. I think he's going to crowd Derrick Lewis's power a little bit too much. I don't think he's going to fight at the range to where Lewis is going to be comfortable getting those big long-range hooks off at. I actually think Daukaus is going to keep it a lot more on the inside, force this to become more a fight about sort of the technique and less about just the power. And I know that's obvious to say he's the smaller guy, he kind of has to do that. But when Daukaus is at his best is when he has some of those pitter-patter shots on the inside, using his footwork, because he's not someone who just is a smaller heavyweight. He's a smaller heavyweight by design. Like, he's thought about all of this throughout his career because he could walk around at 250 and just be a heavyweight at 250 pounds, but he prefers to fight at a lighter weight, and I do think we're finally going to start to see that pay off. I think he's going to be able to get it done. Now, could he eat a big shot from Derrick Lewis and get knocked out? Of course he could. That happens to people all the time. But I think Daukaus will be able to stay steady enough early on to not allow Lewis to get his reads for any of his big shots later. And I think we could even see a Chris Daukaus finish around round 2 or 3.
Chris Daukaus just beat a 40-year-old Shamil Durkheimov. Before that, he beat Alexei Oleinik. Last I checked, Alexei Oleinik was 43 in that fight. He beat Rodrigo Nascimento.
Okay, Derrick Lewis has a split decision over Ilir Latifi as one of his last wins.
Hey, man, I'm just telling you the numbers.
I'm just saying, if we want to pick.
I'm just saying what's out there. I like Derrick Lewis. You talk about those short notice entries, that's where Derrick Lewis can definitely capitalize. And listen, this is one of those ones, I love Chris Daukaus for his speed, the power on the end of his shots, the finishing abilities early, the grappling that nobody talks about at a Martinez BJJ. You just think Kyle's the grappler? Chris has got that too. There's so many things that I love about Chris Daukaus and his game. It's a huge step up from a Shamil Durkheimov that not only was 40, but was 40 and had been off for a long, long time. So for me, I like Lewis, the activity. He's one of those guys that when it's not going his way, it looks really bad like it did against Cyril Gahn. So I do worry about it that way. But again, at a plus 120, I got to go with Derrick Lewis here. I like the experience out of him, especially in 5-round fights, getting ready for them. This being his 4th in a row. I'm going Lewis here.
I can't disagree with anything you said. I just think at 36, almost 37, with the amount of damage he's taken, and with the injuries too, like he's had a messed up back, he tore his ACL against JDS, like he's had quite a few injuries throughout his career too, so I do worry about that starting to catch up with him, but I think this is going to be a phenomenal heavyweight fight, and this is the good thing too. If Daukaus is able to get this win, think about all the new fresh heavyweight matchups that we have to look forward to on the horizon, and if Derrick Lewis gets another knockout win, he's just adding to his own record. It's like watching Steph Curry hit 3, so we're going to see something great this Saturday no matter what.
Absolutely amazing fight. We're different on picks. We've got quite a few underdogs on this one. Listen, it's all going to be decided here. The prediction MVP trophy will be handed out at our year-end awards, and you got to be catching those before, well, the year is out. We'll have those with our own John Franklin. But Matt, I absolutely love this card. Coming up this weekend, you know it, you love it. Question mark kicks 2 hours before the prelims. We get the hindsight of the weigh-ins in the week that was. Sometimes Priscilla Cachoeira misses weight, and Matt picks her, well, at the start of the week. At the start of the week, and then switches over to Jillian Robertson. You never know what could happen, and if you're missing that show, you should definitely check it out. Let us know who you have down below in the comments section, not just for this fight, but for the rest of the fights on this card. I absolutely love this card. It's getting me so primed and ready to finish off a great year. So you keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.